Welcome, risk takers and trailblazers. This is the Offbeat Path, where we celebrate those who dare to color outside of the lines of life. I'm your host, Bob Healy, and each episode, I'm going to be sitting down with a guest who's made the bold choice to veer off the well-worn road and carve out their own unique path. From radical career pivots to life-altering personal transformations, we're going to explore the stories of those who have embraced the unconventional. And here's the twist. We're not just about the highlight reel. We're going to dive into the failures, the scrapes, the stumbles, the moments of doubt that come with choosing a road less traveled. Because sometimes the most valuable lessons come from those sharp left turns that didn't quite pan out as planned. So whether you're contemplating your own big leap or just craving a dose of out-of-the-box inspiration, you're in the right place. The Offbeat Path is your reminder that life's most rewarding adventures often begin where the map ends. Get ready to challenge the status quo, embrace the unexpected, and maybe find the courage to blaze your own trail. It's time to buckle up, take a sharp turn towards a life less ordinary. This is the Offbeat Path. Let's get to it. All right, so this is the first podcast. This is it. This is like, I got twisted, an arm twist into doing a podcast, and I thought to have a first guest, I'd have Jiva, because
oh my God,
you're super awesome.
Oh my God, thank you.
So maiden voyage of the podcast, and JivaG. It used to be JivaG Life Coach, right? And then and then now I don't know what's your moniker what's your online handle you're going by these days?
It's just Jiva.
Jiva?
It's just Jiva, G or Jiva.
So for a little background, maybe. So we met, was it 5 years ago now?
Could have been. I think
like
it
2019,
was.
2020, when we both went to India, because I went for a 300-hour training to learn how to do handstands with Raghunath. With our mutual friend Raghunath.
And left with something a lot more valuable.
Yeah. It's a good description. And you came down with your boyfriend or fiance at the time?
Yeah, it was we our long-term partner. Yeah.
Long-term partner, yeah.
Lex, yeah.
And you guys started in the yoga teacher training. And then decided that you wanted to do the wisdom training, right? Which was really just going over like ancient Vedic texts.
Yeah. And
then we sort of just hung out for like a month.
We did.
And then kept in touch, right? Reconnected, 2 years ago in Italy.
That's right.
And hung out in Italy. We had a great conversation on that long bus ride back from, I think it was swimming, right? We went to that like really cool.
Yes, exactly. Oh yeah, that was gorgeous, wasn't it?
It was a beautiful day. And then for some reason you're back over from Germany in the States where you were born. And here you are. You're in my office and we're recording a podcast. It's kind of surreal.
It really is. And you are been such a nice guest, so host. So thank you so much for hosting me.
You're an easy guest. Jiva's sleeping upstairs in one of our spare rooms. So
yeah, they've hid me in the attic.
Yeah.
In the attic.
And you've been very gracious, because what do we have last night? We had a 3-year-old that wanted to get up and see who it was that was coming in right around bedtime, and I wanted to show you all her stars on her ceiling, and then a 4-month-old that's like crying, and this just speaks to who you are. I mean, I'm like grabbing a shower at the end of the night. You know, Jiva's up, settled down. My wife's out for dinner. I'm grabbing a shower, and then I get out of the shower and I look, and there's this WhatsApp message from Jiva like, "Hey, do you want me to help with the baby?" And I'm like, "Oh no, the baby's crying." She's like, "Yeah, it's no problem. Any Jiva can handle it." It's like a baby you've met for less than an hour. You're like, "Yeah, let me come down and hold your child and rock it to sleep for you."
Yeah, I would love to.
Which I think is really indicative of like the person you are. Which is
you're
super sweet.
Wow.
And you grew up like not that far from here, a little up north in New York, right?
Yeah, I grew up in New York City.
Okay.
And when my parents divorced, sort of like Westchester and New York City. So.
And then you spent a lot of time in NYC.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, how does that? So you grew up with you were in an entertainment family, weren't you?
I was, yeah. Both of my parents were actors.
Okay.
And my stepmother was a pianist and my stepfather was a director. So I grew up in a pretty crazy family.
Like director, full feature-length films?
No, commercials. Commercials and just like nature stuff, like National Geographic kind of.
Oh, so like the stuff I would watch when I was a kid, like The Frog. climbs up the branch.
Yes, something
That's
like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then you ended up in New York in a really super interesting time. Something Jiva and I share is where we both were sort of in the punk rock and hardcore scene, albeit she predates me by like a few years.
Good few years. Although I don't look that old. No, I'm only kidding.
Nah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not. I mean, you don't look a day over like 42.
Yeah, 44 I am.
Okay,
right?
great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with it. And so you're hanging out in Westchester. You've got pretty successful parents, and then how do you end up in New York and basically the epicenter of what was, I guess, the punk rock explosion? Like, it wasn't right when the Ramones came out, right? But
No, it was a bit after. It was like 82, 81.
Right. So 76, right, is roughly when all that stuff starts.
That was not. I was like 9.
Isn't it interesting that the generational shift in the punk rock scene and that music scene is like, it's not like 10 years. It's like every 3 years. It's like a different thing.
Absolutely. I have to totally agree with you on that one, because not shortly after I came, about 3 or 4 years after that, sort of like the whole like metal scene came, and like then it just like I didn't want to deal with that, so I kind of left. But yeah, it was really like that.
So who were you like? Where were you going? Who were you seeing when you first got into New York and got into that scene?
Okay, so so I was raised on the Upper West Side. Mm-hmm. I was raised on 98th and Riverside. And when my parents divorced, my mom bought some house in a bougie part of Westchester. I was 9 or 10. It was hideous for me and my brother. We hated it. We just like really hated it. Mm-hmm. And I was not happy in Westchester at all. It was just like either like, golf club or townies. And I just didn't fit into anything. It was just weird suburban, upper middle class, weird people. Like, I just thought they were weird. I'm a city kid. Mm-hmm. And our house was haunted. So I think we share that.
Yeah. I grew up in like an 18th century house in the suburbs that was very much haunted.
Yeah, ours too, and it was not a good haunting.
Ours were fine.
Yeah, see, you're lucky for that. We had Albert Fish in my house.
Oh, who's Albert Fish?
You don't know who Albert Fish is?
I don't know who Albert Fish is.
You don't know who Albert Fish is?
I do not know who Albert Fish is.
He was one of the most sinister serial killers.
Wait, that was his house?
That was where he killed the children and ate them.
So this is how you afforded the house then? Like, wait. All right, wait, back up. So like so you're in this house in what? Like the 70s?
The 80s, yeah.
The 80s.
We were greeted with swastikas because our neighbors were very racist, and we were a Jewish family. So we moved there. It was like Jew go home. That's like the first 2 weeks of being there. So, tire slashed, and on the barn, a huge swastika spray painted. That was really...
I mean, that pretty much proves that there's idiots in every time period. But so wait, when did Albert Fish do all this stuff?
In the 20s.
Okay, so it's not like you bought it right after.
No. But the family who had it before... So here's the weird thing. Every family who's had it has had a tragedy in their family, as I have. Mm-hmm. And so the family before, the man went crazy and his son hung himself in the barn.
Okay.
And we got the house. I don't know. I don't remember who lived there before, but this house, if you look on the market now, it's sold like every 3 years, every 4 years. Nobody wants to stay in that house. And
it's like the Amityville Horror house.
It was horrifying. I never got sleep. I think I suffered from a lot of anxiety and depression when I was a kid because it was horrible. And actually my parents, they just didn't acknowledge it. Mm-hmm. It was like the elephant in the room, like don't talk about it. When I was scared, it was just like they would just lock their door and be like, "Oh, you just have to deal with it." So it was pretty scary. And the whole neighborhood in each house was very haunted. My friend Amy, who I grew up with, she grew up like 5 houses down the road, and her house would we would run to each other's houses. because like something would happen at her house and she'd be like, ah, she'd like run out of the house, come up to my house, and I'd run out of my house. And it was just,
the ghosts are acting up in your house. Oh, no, they're acting up in my house. We got to find someplace else to hang out.
totally, it was just so weird.
We had this babysitter once. My parents went out to dinner. I don't remember the story, but they tell it, where lived in an 18th century house, and the walls are very thin. You could sort of hear the pipes, that were installed later, and when the hot water would run through them, you could hear it run through the pipes.
Yeah.
And the electricity was old, so you would get these spurts of electricity coming through your system where like the TV would turn on its own.
Yeah.
And that wasn't haunting. That was just like,
that's just the electricity thing. Yeah.
But this young woman who was sort of watching myself and my 3 siblings that night, my mom tells the story that they're out at a restaurant. So this is like before cell phones, where you got to call the restaurant to get the parents when there's a problem at home.
I remember that. Yeah.
I mean, it's so different now. Like now you go out, there's a problem with your kid, you get a text, right?
Yeah.
Like back then, if there's a problem and we caused a problem at home, my parents came home angry because it was like we were at a dinner. I had to get up. I had to take a phone call in the restaurant.
Oh my God, totally. How embarrassing.
Yeah. But anyway, so she calls them, and apparently she's in tears, and she says, "What is going on with your house? There's the lights have turned off. The TV's turning on its own, and there's blood running down the walls." Because she's hearing the lights had shut off. But even though the light switch doesn't work, the TV's turning on, and she can hear this like liquid draining through the walls. Anyway, so
and she was like, what, 14? Like back then, you had like the 13-year-old, taking care of your kids.
Right, yeah,
like
14, 15, who knows? I mean, I don't know that she ever babysat us again. And years later, with many years of therapy, I'm sure she's fine. So you grew up in haunted houses in Westchester, and so for that reason, you just went to New York City to get the hell away. Is that how it works?
Well, so I was a very outspoken child, believe it or not. So, and I just like, I had all kinds of like, I had dyslexia and like lots of, I was put on the, learning disability bus,
You rode the short bus?
I was the short bus. Gotcha. I just didn't know what to do with kids like me, and there wasn't the diagnosis of ADHD back then. There wasn't like anything like that. I was like super hyper, super like fidgety and disinterested in pretty much everything except for creative writing and other art and like everything else. The creative writing, I always got A's, and as soon as it came to things like math, I was just like Patrick from SpongeBob. What? Why? So, plus the haunting of the house. Plus, I never wanted to be in Westchester. Plus, I got teased and I got picked on because I was the freak. They used to sing. Do you know the Flintstones?
Yeah.
So like way out, way out. That. Yeah. They were the Martians. So they used to sing that to our family basically because we were just like, we did not fit in. Like my parents were actors. Like everyone had long hair, including my brother, including my, like we were just not Westchester material. And so my brother got teased. I got teased. My sister got teased. Well, actually, she was more popular. She later on, she was just really popular. And, but in sort of the brainy way, because she was very intelligent and also she had anorexia. It's terrible. So at about 14, I would spend every weekend with my dad. And every weekend I'd go to the city and I would be so excited because I would go to the city, be able to be home, be with my dad, be at home. And I didn't particularly get along with my stepfather or my mother, actually. Was not particularly fond of either of them. And I always was like, I want to go home, I want to go back to dad, and I don't want to be here. I freaking hate school. I freaking hate it up here. I just hate it. It was real rough. And so one day I just was in the city and it was a Sunday and I was already hanging out downtown on the weekends, going to hardcore matinees. I got into punk when I was grounded. So I was grounded for a whole summer. Like, that's what my house was. Like, you're grounded for the whole summer, which means you have to stay in your room the whole summer.
Oof.
Really bad. So
and this is not like now where, you've got like your phone and a computer.
Oh, no.
And like,
no.
It's like,
and also she cleared my room out. So I just had a bed, and I begged her to leave me my music. So I had a record player and a bed.
You were doing like Hard Time in Solitaire.
Yeah, exactly.
It.
So I know that sounds really extreme. That was like my norm, but
that's
how it was back then.
I don't know. I grew up in the 80s, like early 90s, and it was pre-internet, and it was like my parents didn't let us have TVs in our room. That was like, I had friends with TVs and Nintendos in their room, and I was like, your parents are the coolest people in the world. Like, your parents are such liberated people. Like mine, I live in the gulag, like at the house where, I had books and I had, whatever, exactly. But I didn't. And I think it was purposeful. And I think about that now with kids. Like, I don't want your room to be a fun place to go.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if I send you to your room,
it's supposed to be
your room, not like, an entertainment center.
It's also, you're not doing your kids any favor by having that stuff.
I don't think so. Every parent's different, but I don't know. We try to limit our daughter's screen time.
I think it's good.
Like, my daughter got up this morning, as she does every morning. She goes, movie? Blippy? I'm like, no, sweetie, let's not. Let's get you some food and let's like go hang out and help Dad feed the dogs. Like, help me do stuff, like anything.
That's good.
Really, just anything.
Engage them. You need to engage them, and then when they're engaged,
just anything to keep them off of the screen. But, so you're grounded and going to punk rock shows. How's that work?
So here was the thing. Often, like when I was grounded, I wasn't allowed to go to my dad's house, which was like so wrong. You can't do that. So, but anyway, so I was grounded. I was switching through the radio, checking all the stations, and I came to this like college radio station called WARY. Always remember that. It was like Mercy College radio station, and it was like they had like 2 hours a day, and they were playing like The Cure and like all this stuff, and I was like, what is this music? And I was like 11, maybe 12, something like that, and I was like, what is this music? What is this music? This is amazing. And then like I heard the Sex Pistols, and then I heard like all this stuff, and I was like, oh my God, somebody just wrote music of how I feel. Like, how is this even possible that this is existing? I never knew a punk, never saw a punk, never noticed it. I was 11. And I was still, listening to the Bee Gees and Saturday Night Fever and like my parents' records, Zeppelin and the Stones and whatever, and then all of a sudden this comes out. I'm like, what the hell is this? And so I listened to it every time, every day, or whenever it was on. I can't remember, but I listened to it as often as I could. And one day I went to the Galleria. It was a mall in White Plains, and there was a record store there. And I went into the record store, and they had this little teeny section. It was like alternative, or I don't know what they call it, punk rock or whatever it was. Just like, it wasn't like in metal, and it wasn't in classic rock, and it wasn't in that. And I started to fold through the records, and I saw a Dead Boys album.
Nice.
Young, Loud, and Snotty.
Yep.
And I didn't know them. I just saw the cover. I was like, all right, I'm getting this.
Yeah, the cover of that album is great.
I'm freaking getting this
because it's the picture of the four of them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And they look
and
like
CB's
so
is on the
and they look so freaking cool.
Yeah, totally. I was like, okay, that's what I'm getting. And then, never mind the bollocks, because it was like the color of that
Pink
record.
And green,
I was like, what is this? So I bought those 2 records. And
those originals are worth ridiculous money now.
Totally. I got Gang of 4.
Oh, wow.
Because I loved the name.
Okay.
I was like, Gang of 4. Okay. I didn't know it was a political thing, but
right.
I was like, oh, that looks cool. I just sort of like went on. So I bought like 3 or 4 records, and those were the ones I remember, but I know I brought a few others. And I went home and I listened to them on repeat forever and ever. And I started looking at the album covers and seeing how they dressed. And I said, I want to dress like them. But I thought they were all from England. I didn't know anyone was from the States. No idea. So I was like, okay, if I want to be punk and have punk friends, I have to go to London. Like, I can't do it here. There's no such things as punk rock in America. So I like did this all on my own. Like, didn't know anybody who was even into this. Then one day I went to the city, and my dad had a motorcycle. So we used to take these like rides downtown. We'd go to Chinatown or we'd go to Orchard Street or whatever we do. So it was a beautiful summer. I always remember this. It's just literally imprinted in my head. So we take a ride down. The first, I got fascinated. We passed this place called Ramrod. I don't know if they were having some function in the daytime, maybe like a meetup. I don't know what it was. And there was all these like motorcycle guys in leather and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, those are such cool guys. I was like, wow, they look wild, and because I never saw anything I lived in the Upper West Side. There's a lot of hippies, all this, but there wasn't really any wasn't like the Village,
Yeah.
And I was still a kid. I was like 11, 12. So we go down the West Side Highway and we come back up on the Bowery. And it was Saturday, Sunday, something like that. I can't remember if Saturday matinees came first or the Sunday matinees came first. I can't remember. And all of a sudden we passed CBGB's and there's all these punks hanging out front of CBGB's. And I realized when I looked at CBGB's, I was like, wait a second, that's the cover of the Dead Boys record. And I literally said, Dad, stop. He pulls over and I'm like, that's on my record cover. And I just thought there are other punk rockers. I don't have to go to London.
You don't.
So I was super excited, super happy. But I was so young, I wasn't going to go down there alone. I didn't know anything about it.
Because you were what, 12?
I was 11.
11. Okay, you're still 11.
Yeah, I was 11. And it was a summer, so I turned 12 at some point in that year. So I was 11, 12. And then my dad, all parents want their kids to be like them. So he sent me to Lee Strasberg, which is an acting school on 14th Street. During the weekends. It was on a Saturday, you go once a week. And there I met this woman named, a girl named Valerie, and she had a mohawk.
I mean, they're cool. Speaking from experience, they're pretty cool.
And I was like, oh my God, it's another one. And I had a little Sex Pistols button that I bought. And I had safety pins. And I just styled myself the way I saw them on the record covers. I didn't really cut my own clothes, and I did all kinds of stuff, So Valerie, we talked. And then after, she was like, look, my boyfriend plays in this band, and I'm going down to CBGB's afterwards. There's a matinee. You want to come? And I remembered that from his. It was a year later.
So you're 13, almost 12, 13.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. And I was so nervous. My heart was just pumping so hard. And we showed up to the matinee, and it was The Abused. Valerie's boyfriend was Kevin from The Abused. And they were straight edge at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and who else was there? And the first person I met there was Kevin from The Abused. Then it was Jimmy G.
Oh,
from Murphy's Law.
Yep.
And little Steve Poss, who passed recently.
Mm-hmm.
But those were the first people I met down there. And I was super nervous. And when I went into CBGB's, I was terrified.
I mean, I remember playing that place. I remember playing the first time we played CB's. Oh God, it was probably in the early 2000s. I mean, it was before it shut down. And I remember being nervous playing that place. And I had been to shows there, right? But even in the 2000s, the place had a reputation. I mean, because you live in the United States where your version of history is a historical site is someplace Jimi Hendrix played 40 years ago.
Right.
And then you go to Europe, like Germany, where you live, and they're like, oh, 300-year-old home, new construction.
Yeah, totally.
So I remember going to CB's, and I remember those feelings because it's oh my God, there's so much history here. And
oh my God, totally.
And I'm a 20, I mean, I've toured at that point, and it's still.
But CB's, it was
there was something about the place. Favorite place to play, favorite stage to play. Great sound system, really good
best
sound
acoustics.
System. Best acoustics.
That is the best acoustics ever.
One of my favorite places to play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So you go to CB's, you see a show, you're hooked.
Totally hooked.
Yeah.
Totally hooked. And mind you, I'm like 12, maybe pushing 13, somewhere in there.
But I mean, it's abnormal now, but that's not abnormal back then. Right?
No, there was a couple of us hanging, like 12, 13-year-olds.
Yeah. I mean, I think about shows I used to go to and people were like 16, 15. Like it was kind of the age, where you would start to see younger kids show up to shows, 15, 16. And because my generation, sometimes you get them showing up with their dads or their moms who went to shows and now they're taking their kid to a punk show. Yeah. But of course, that's like not the bag anybody's in like 1980.
True.
Yeah. So, like, would you just start going every moment you could get on the shows?
Yeah, I would start, and then I would start. My dad was a little too codependent and people pleasing. He just wanted me to be happy. That was all his thing. I want you to be happy. I want you to be happy, at my own detriment. And he knew how much I was suffering up in Westchester, and he knew how much I just hated being there. So he always wanted to make it nice when I came. So he would just let me do everything. He just let me run wild. As long as I was chaperoned by an older friend or something like that, it was okay. Yeah.
To your detriment, though.
To my detriment, yeah. Totally. So,
because that's sort of where your story begins, right? Is those shows.
Totally.
Like, so you're going to shows, and that's, 1980 is an interesting sort of that piece is like a really interesting part of punk rock history insofar as, there's always this element of alcohol and drugs throughout. From this, the beginning all the way in. But anybody who knows the story of Sid Vicious and
totally. That was like my idol. Like, what a horrible idol I have. Disgusting, actually. I was like, Sid, he was the coolest ever.
Right. And
cool and dead.
Cool and the heroin addict.
Yeah, totally.
And so, as I understand it, obviously it's 3 years, 1980s, 3 years before I'm even born, but that's really sort of the time where drugs really start to get into that scene. It goes from like bands using them to like becomes very sort of commonplace, right?
Yeah, the heroin for me, we'll get to that part, but that didn't start back then.
No.
And it didn't start in the hardcore scene.
Really?
Not at all. It started, I started hanging out with like that whole like Cop Shoot Cop stuff. You know Cop Shoot Cop?
No.
The band? Okay. Just like the whole Artie, Lower East Side thing. It started there. It started that. That's where it started. And it started like hanging out with, do you remember, actually it didn't really start there. I remember where it started, but those are the people I sort of was drawn to later, like when I was 19.
19.
That's when I started, yeah.
So you're hanging out in the hardcore scene for like 7 years.
Yeah, but I left and went to California. Okay. So there's a whole lot of stuff in between there. And tried to lived in Woodstock. So basically when I was 14, it became unbearable to go back to Westchester. I would have this, it was just the most, on a Sunday when I know I'd have to take the train back up, it was just I would have literal, just such anxieties and just oh my God, I have to go back up there. It's fucking horrible.
Yeah, it's like, if you're not into that, it's like a prison.
It was horrible.
It's like getting really a weekend furlough from prison, right?
Exactly like that. And even worse because I wasn't getting supported at home and I wasn't getting supported at school. They didn't know how. It's not like they didn't want to. They just didn't know how. They just, back then it was you don't fulfill this, mold, then they want to just beat you into that one square. And instead of saying, okay, she's not square, she's a star, or she's a circle, or she's a heart, how can we work with that? They just try to beat you into some sort of, so this was really hard. And So I didn't get the support I needed.
Mm-hmm.
Put it that way. I can't say that I didn't get support. I'm sure they tried to the best of their ability.
I mean, and do you think that you think that has a lot of influence on what happened, down the road with you? The fact that, like, okay, I don't fit in. I've got these issues. Nobody seems to be able to help me to address them. Because when you're 12, 13, right? All you can figure out maybe at that point with the life experience you have is like, all right, I don't fit in.
Totally.
Like, maybe you're not deeply thinking about all the reasons why. You're just like, this isn't working for me.
Right.
And so, from there, right? Like, because I remember, I was sort of lucky to be, I guess, smarter than some of the people around me when I went to school in some regard.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I wasn't really artsy, but I wasn't social, right?
I
Wasn't popular.
I always hung out with people like you. You would have been the person I would have hung out with.
Sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, no, you would have been. I didn't like the...
Yeah, I wasn't like in the in crowd for whatever reason, socially awkward, didn't know how to talk to people. And, same thing. I had a cousin that gave me a tape, and I would listen to my mom's music, which was like Billy Joel, which is still, as far as I'm concerned, a great artist. I will go see him any day of the week.
Love Billy Joel. Agreed. Totally agreed.
And like, she listened to Genesis. I never really got into that. I was just never crazy about it. She listened to, so for me, what really started to like, okay, this is some of the stuff I like. So she listened to Queen, and the story of that band's amazing. And they're just such a talented group of individuals. And I read a little bit about them in some magazine back when you read magazines, and it was a story of them, and it was like, it's 4 people who were totally oddballs they weren't cool people, and they formed a band, and I was like, oh, people
so I could do that too.
Yeah, like people like me can go do that. That was really interesting. And then I had a cousin that gave me a tape of on one side was Black Sabbath. I was 11, and he left me a mixtape.
I love it.
For anybody who doesn't know what those are like, although their tapes are coming back now.
I spent hours making those things.
Yeah.
And having like 1 or 2 people in mind, like,
yeah. And so mixtape, and it was a tape. On one side was the second Black Sabbath album, War Pigs, and oh my God, I can't believe it. I knew it 3 seconds
Sabbath,
ago.
Bloody Sabbath.
No, it was before that. It was
just Black Sabbath, the record.
No, it wasn't their first one. It was their second one, where it was their breakout album, where they had like War Pigs. They had oh my God. And now I'm going to need to go back and listen to it. So it's the second Black Sabbath album. Mm-hmm. And then the other side is the first Ramones record, and Nevermind the Bollocks. Because, they're a little shorter than a Black Sabbath album. Yeah. And so I listened to Black Sabbath, and I was like, this is amazing. This guy's voice is nuts. Like, this is awesome. And then I listened to the other side, and believe it or not, I wasn't into the Sex Pistols. I was like, this is sloppy. But the Ramones, there was just something about, like, it's just quick, and it was, and the guitar was like a buzzsaw, and it just, every song was like one after the other, energy. Yeah. And I was a hyper kid, so I was like, okay, yeah. And so I remember thinking, well, this is it. This is obviously the missing piece of my life, is this. And then you dive into the culture of it, and so. And then I saw the Misfits. Like, I got a Misfits record somehow, and then my life was over.
Oh my God! Then it was, oh my God!
Well, because it was weird. I wasn't like a political person. I was too young to really understand politics, and I didn't like it. Like, people, I don't know, at the time. It's funny for me to say now, because at the time I was just like, I had heard these bands that were really political, and I'm like, you sound like you're complaining, and I don't know, I'm not.
I just want to have some fun.
Yeah, I just want to have fun, and then the Misfits were like, we're just going to write about horror movies. And they looked cool. They were all in black. They were jacked,
Totally.
And they were like these cool haircuts. And I was like, this is awesome.
Was this Misfits with Glendale?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so this was before they got back together.
Yeah. Okay.
Before, I mean, it was, at the time, they didn't exist anymore. They were like a band for 5 years and then gone.
Yeah.
The point is, getting back to what you were saying, I remember going through all that between like 11 and 13, having no place to go to shows. I'm in the suburbs. There's like nowhere.
Were you that age as well?
Yeah, I was 11 when I got into it. So like 12,
goodness.
13, I would
so
really
cool.
explore.
I didn't know that you were that age. That's so cool.
And for whatever reason, understanding like, okay, I don't fit in and nobody else seems to get me. My parents tried, but they, it was difficult. I was a difficult kid. And so like, this is it. I had a room on the third floor of my house and I would just go home every night and play that until I went to high school in Philly and learned what warehouse shows were. And then I was like, oh, okay.
This is the life.
like, okay, Kill Time, Stalag 13. This is great. Like I can go see these bands and they look like me and they dress like me. And there's a bunch of other people that are really, really super awkward. And this is, but anyway.
So when you started like with 11, 12, 13, 14, did you dress like that? Or you didn't have the means?
Yeah. I mean, like you, I wasn't around a bunch of people who dressed like that. And so, I mean, Hot Topic existed and I would go there, but I really didn't, it was expensive.
What's Hot Topic?
Hot Topic was I think it's still around. It was like a alternative clothing store, but it was corporate. It was in the malls.
So it's like mall punk store. Okay.
And they had the Wall, which was a CD store and record store.
Okay.
And very similar. I would go to the Wall and I would look at like they didn't really have a punk rock section, but they had a metal section and the punk rock sort of got thrown into it. Oh. So I would just look at album covers that were cool, like and buy those. Particularly if they had explicit lyrics, parental guidance suggested, I'd be like, all right, I'll take that one and that one and that one.
Have that one.
Yeah, that was when Tipper Gore got the whole like rock and roll's destroying the youth, and that sort of came out
like
of
burn
that.
all records.
And Dean Simmons goes and testifies, and like he's actually eloquent and intelligent.
Yeah,
and there's a really great movie of that,
really?
and I think Dean Simmons plays himself. And when he goes in to testify, I just never forget. And I watched the actual video of it, and they're like, he comes in looking like Twisted Sister. He comes and he sits down looking like that in a congressional hearing.
What's his name again for Twisted Sister?
Is it Dean Simmons?
Dean Simmons.
Yeah.
No.
Simmons. He's the lead singer of Twisted Sister.
Yeah.
I probably got it wrong. But he sits down looking like his, persona. In a congressional hearing, Frank Zappa's there because he was leading the charge against it.
Zappa. Oh my God! And
Frank Zappa's giving this very eloquent, like, oh, and this is why you can't deny music and whatever. Super smart guy. And Dean Simmons and the lead singer from Twisted Sister is just sitting there. And so finally they ask him a question, like Al Gore thinking, like, I'm gonna get this guy, and he's just like, he goes, do you think that singing the lyrics you think makes you like a good person or like he's like, it's not Christian or whatever. He's like, well, I am a Christian. And I think it, my what I do gives young people an outlet. And I think we're losing a lot of young people. And I think what I do is really great. It gives people who don't fit into a mold a place to belong. And I think that's really important. So yeah, I think what I do makes me a great Christian because I really, speak to the people that Jesus spoke to, which was the dispossessed and the downtrodden. And you just watch him like destroy them. And he's very eloquent, but he looks, he doesn't have the makeup on. He doesn't have the makeup on, but he's got the long hair. He's got glasses that are sitting on his head. And he's got like the cut off jean, vest and like bare arms in a congressional hearing. Like Frank Zappa's in a suit and he's just like, and I just never forgot watching that. In that movie and then watching the original thing. The guy's so eloquent. So anyway, I got into that and then I just, and then when I went to high school, I found out that there were, these things called warehouse shows. People would rent out like a warehouse and then just throw a show.
Yeah.
It was like total DIY. And it was like $5 and you would go there and
love it.
There was all kinds of ridiculous stuff happening. I mean, it was in like the parts of Philadelphia that weren't really nice. And, and I would go there as like a 13 or 14 year, like 14, like sophomore year of high school kid in the city. Cause I was going to school in Philly. Mm-hmm. So I would like on a Friday, just tell my mom I was going somewhere else.
So,
go to a show, tell her sleeping over a friend's house, like sort of end up wherever I ended up. And then I like found my people, except that there were a bunch of like Nazi punks and skinheads in the scene at that time. And that was really,
yeah,
back then Philly had a real problem with it.
I remember
and they weren't,
phase of that.
And it was like you had these skinheads who were hammer skins. Like they were big, beefy, like guys that looked like they were prepping to go to prison, you know? Like and to
be with Aryan Nation.
Yeah, I mean just idiots. And then you would have these punk rock kids who were like into that stuff. And it was really weird for me because I was like, this is supposed to be an accepting place, and by definition, you're the most unaccepting people I've ever met. And I sort of had a mouth on me because I was an introvert, but then I got to this place and I could be somebody else. So I had this mouth, and I used to get rolled by these guys all the time because I would just be like, yeah, you know, I would just mouth off, and they'd be like a good foot taller than me and like 50 pounds heavier, and they'd like stuff me in a trash can and roll me down the alley and like, yeah. So
I love that.
And then, and yeah, so yeah, there was a problem with that. But it sort of went away. People started running shows. A lot of bands who would start to tour through Philly would put on their contracts, no Nazi paraphernalia, no racist paraphernalia coming through. Good. And so promoters would just, I mean, I became a promoter in Philly. I ran like 3 venues, and so we just wouldn't let them in. And so they sort of figured out like, okay, well, we're just not being allowed in.
That's right. You better go play in the woods somewhere with your freaking
uncles
and cousins.
They all either moved to like Lancaster or Asbury Park. And then that became like the enclave for a long time.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, Asbury Park now is a great place.
Okay, but then it was just full of Nazis.
I mean, if you were in the punk scene, that was the reputation. Like, yo, I'm going to see a show at Asbury Lanes. You're bringing like a knife and some brass knuckles, right? Because the people that hang out there are dangerous folks.
Wow.
And so, yeah, now Asbury Park's like, at least parts of it are like very nice and gentrified, and there's a bunch of devotee Krishna people down there.
Are there really?
Yeah, there's a huge community down there. I went to my first kirtan in Asbury Park. Yeah. But so I guess the point I was getting to is like, that seems to be the age, right? Like 11, 12, 13, where, you know, and it has an effect, right? If you're a young person who feels like you don't belong, you start to look for places to fit in. And sometimes, right, totally. That lasts well into adulthood, right?
Yeah.
So you go to California, you travel around a bit.
Well, so at 14, I called my mother on a Sunday evening. I was at my friend Sasha's house, who lived in St. Mark's. She was born and raised on St. Mark's. For those who don't know, St. Mark's is like
it's like next to CV's. It's so it's the place.
Yeah. So she was raised she was raised right on Avenue A in St. Mark's. Mm-hmm. So, and that's where I would stay. And so I was staying at her house. It was a Sunday night, and I called my mother and I said, I'm not coming home. And she said, I can't do it anymore. I just can't come home. I don't want to go to school tomorrow. Because I mean, it was just so horrible for me. I was just like, literally, like, I cannot do this. And such anxiety. And she said, okay, Gwen, I will be at the train at 7:30 tomorrow morning. If you are not there, then don't bother coming home.
Jeez.
So I said, okay. Put up the phone. I went, yes. And my mom instructed my father not to take me in.
Did he comply?
Yeah, my dad usually complied with what my mom said, generally. But he didn't. I mean, he would have if I would have said, I want to come home.
Right.
He would have definitely done it. But I didn't. I didn't want to go home. I was like, freedom. But yeah,
so at 14, you're basically an emancipated minor in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
In totally. 1982.
Something like that, yeah. Maybe
not quite the same New York City it is now.
No.
Well, maybe there's some parallels these days. But in between, it got really nice.
So Sasha's mom was super nice and said, you can stay here, no worries. So I stayed there for a while, but there was still like no...
Were you like going to school during this time? No. So you basically dropped out at 14?
I just left school.
Okay.
I left all that. I tried to go back to school afterwards. So I was just doing whatever. And I had Sasha and Dee, who's also passed. She died a horrible death. Later on, I found out, just like heartbreaking. But Dee and I were like really best friends, and she was from California. Her dad lived in Rockaway Beach, and she wanted to go back to California to go and live with her mom. And so we decided with $12 in our pocket that we're going to hitchhike to California.
Seems reasonable.
Totally.
What could go wrong?
Oh, so we started, it was February, it was freezing cold. We made it to Chicago.
In February?
In February, we made it to Chicago.
Brutal.
We made it to Chicago and then had to take a Greyhound bus. But that was a long story. We hitchhiked. We came across all kinds of weird people, all kinds of stuff who thought we were boys. We were both skinheads. So we had shaved heads, both of us. Pedophiles trying to pick us up. Like, hey, you boys, you know, like, what are you doing? We're like, yeah, we're not boys, you freaking freak. You know, like, just all kinds of weird stuff. Like, really nice people, too. Like, really nice guys picking us up. Nice, like, actually, state trooper came, picked us up, and he was like, where are you guys going? And we're just like, well, we're just trying to get home. And he was like, well, you can't hitchhike here. You're in the middle of the freaking highway. You can't do that. So he gave us like $5 and dropped us off at an exit where we were allowed to, or an entrance where we were allowed to, and didn't call child services, nothing, which is like insane.
I'm just amazed that $5 was actually something that could get you fed back then.
Oh my God, totally. Yeah. It was like meal. It was like two meals for both of us. And it was just like, good luck. Take care out here. And we made it to Chicago. Then she called her mom and said, can you please send us a Greyhound bus ticket? So we get a Greyhound bus ticket. We make it to Arizona, and we get kicked out of the bus because we were huffing glue and doing all kinds of stuff.
So you're doing drugs at this point?
Yeah, but I wasn't doing heavy drugs.
Right, but like what? Like weed and
huffing glue and that kind of stuff. We were huffing glue on the bus, and it was some like weird redneck driver because we just switched. It wasn't like the whole way, you know, and he didn't like us. I mean, back then in the 80s, if you had blue hair, I had blue hair.
Right.
That was just like, you know, they'll use any excuse to kick you out of the bus. We were really not being like assholes or anything. We were really just minding our own business. But he was like, okay, you're huffing glue, you're out, you know. So we're like stranded in Arizona. And so we had to hitchhike from Arizona to Escondido, where she was from. And we got there. So I was there for...
You're 14?
14.
Yeah. It's just you 14-year-old kids that can't like walk to the bus stop. Maybe I'm being, but it's just a different.
Oh my God, totally. If I look at a 14-year-old now, I'm like,
oh yeah,
holy crap! Where's the adult? You know, like, what's going on?
I mean, if I saw a 14-year-old on the road like hitchhiking, it's like, I mean, I think about it, the stuff I used to do at like 16 or 15, and I'm like, now as I'm a parent, I'm like, I got to figure out how to keep my kid from ever doing any of those things.
It's so true. But I think in today's world, it's totally different. It's so different.
You think it's safer?
I think it's different. I think there's different danger, stranger danger.
It's that's fair.
Different things. It's like, it's all online. It's all like all kinds of weird stuff going on. And here you've got school shootings here. You got all kinds of weird stuff going on, you know. It's just a different form of ugliness in the world. Yeah. But it's still ugly.
I mean, that's the interesting part about having grown up in the punk scene is that, you know, as an adult now, I talk to people and they'll say, well, you know, things were different back then. It was a different time. People were nicer to each other. And I actually often think, not really. It was different. But I don't know that it was better. Like, there were still jerks and people that were doing horrible stuff. And I mean, maybe it got painted over more, maybe, you know, but, you know, maybe the tolerance level for some of it's a little lower these days, but I saw stuff that probably you shouldn't see as a 15-year-old, but
yeah, absolutely.
So you get to Escondido pretty much intact.
Pretty much intact.
Yeah. And then you hang out in California.
I hang out in California. And at that time, there was also a lot of Nazi punks.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in California.
Yeah.
We show up to some party. There's like some house party somewhere. That's what they did in California. It's like a house party.
We should say real Nazis. Not like the epithet that people use now where you're a Nazi because you don't agree with me or you're a fascist. Like people who are like true believers.
Yes.
That like, the white race was the supreme race. Mein Kampf was a deep philosophical work, and like
exactly,
and violence was an acceptable means in order to enforce that worldview on a regular basis.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I was used to getting beaten up because people often would mistake me for a boy. Always a skinhead, always had shaved. Do you know the book Sunday Matinee?
Yeah.
The Matinee? Yeah, I'm in that book.
Yeah, I've seen the picture.
Yeah. So you see how I used to look.
Yeah, I mean, you look like a 14-year-old young. You know what you look like in that is like a 12-year-old boy.
Exactly, and that's what most people thought I was. Most people thought
like you just look like somebody who's a little too young to be there, but somehow got there.
Yeah, exactly. So when we went to this party, we got literally beat up by like this huge guy, like literally beat up and kicked out of the house. And I was like, okay, I don't like it here. I don't like the scene here. I don't like anyone here. And so I went up staying for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then Dee's mom called my dad in New York and was like, look, she needs to come home. Mm-hmm. Like, she can't be here.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was like, absolutely. So I said, I'm ready to come home. I was out of my house for, 9 months or so. And I'm ready to go home. I'm 15 now, I think. I turned 15 already. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It's all a little foggy somewhere in that area. 14, 15. I come home and my dad was really sweet. I loved my dad very much. And we discussed options for me, like, what am I going to do? I was like, I really love California and I really want to go to California. So we searched for boarding schools. So he wanted to send me to this boarding school called Happy Valley.
This sounds like the beginning of a horror movie.
In Ojai. Alternative school. And so he sent me to alternative school. He sent me to Happy Valley School, where I met Lisa Presley. And she was my next door neighbor. And we became really close. And I was about to go to Thanksgiving with her because I can't fly back to New York. And I got kicked out.
You? Can't imagine.
It wasn't like a violent kick out, but they were just like, we can't have her here. She's just a wild card. She's too wild.
Like, what are you doing?
I think I was just having a mental breakdown. Yeah. I was crying a lot. And it was really difficult to be like on the streets, running around doing what I wanted, and then all of a sudden being in this like contained environment.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like with rules and schoolwork, which I was really bad at, and just feeling really, I guess, in hindsight, it's funny that you ask because I never really talked about it, or I never talked about this, but it was very challenging.
Yeah, and like you're being sent to boarding school.
Yeah.
You got two parents that basically,
don't know what to do with you.
Yeah, don't know what to do with you. Cut you
no
off.
Clue.
You don't fit in anywhere in where you grew up. And so now you end up in California in a boarding school that apparently you don't fit in there either because they ask you to leave.
Yeah.
All right, so you get out of boarding school, you're in Ojai.
That's when my dad was furious. So he flew me back to New York and he didn't talk to me. Like, he picked me up at the airport, and I've never seen my dad that angry. Like he like lost thousands and thousands of dollars because asked me to leave. I think they gave him his money back at some point because I wasn't like a bad kid. I don't think I was ever like a bad kid. I never like was disrespectful, but I just had a lot of stuff going on that wasn't addressed. So when I got back, I was like, okay, so I have to go to school. So he tried to get me, because he's, into acting. He was like, okay, so we're going to do this again. I'm going to get you to performing arts, because the director of the performing arts was my dad's friend. I'll get you into there, and we'll try that. So
you're like 16 now.
I'm 15 still.
Okay.
End of 15, I think. Yeah, 15.
This is more than most people these days experience in like their 10 years of adolescence.
I know. I went through like 4 or 5 high schools.
Yeah.
And then, so I went to the auditions and did all that stuff. And then they were like, okay, you can come, but there's like this condition, because I was like sort of gray area. Like they didn't really know. They were kind of unsure about me. And then I was like, okay, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm sick of conditions. Like once you've had complete freedom and then all of a sudden you're like this, I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know that I can be held that space. So, I mean, I didn't think that, but in hindsight now, I'm like, nobody could hold that space.
Right.
Like, who's going to hold that space? They're dealing with holding all the space for everyone. You can't like be specific on one pupil. It's not possible. So, so I wound up going to like a really ghetto school. I wound up going to the school in my area, in my neighborhood. It was on 101st in Amsterdam, which was right at the projects. And it was called Westside High. Shout out if anyone ever knows that school. It was Martin Luther King and Park West Alternative, which means those are the 2 roughest schools in all of New York City. The kids who got kicked out of there went to Westside High. So that's when I discovered hip hop. So I was kind of out of the punk thing, hanging out with a lot of hip hoppers, but knowing that.
So this is like 1985. So this is the very sort of beginning of hip hop.
Oh, totally. So I was like,
I mean, the school doesn't sound cool, but that sounds really cool. I mean, it sounds interesting.
Well, it was because, and I'm like, my skinhead was growing out. I had like just about this much hair. I even have like, I found a picture of me back then. I had like this, horrible. So I was hanging out there. I mean, it's like my neighborhood. I grew up in that neighborhood, and I knew some of the kids from my grade school when I went to grade school before we moved up to Westchester. Hanging out with the Rocksteady crew because they all came from there. Okay. And like, I still listened to punk. I still liked it, and I still sort of was like hip hop, punk rock, sort of. And every once in a while, I go down to CB's, and Buck to Louie, right? Yeah. So that's where we vibe.
Yeah, Louie from Antidote.
Yeah. So Louie and I like kind of.
He just passed away, didn't he?
No.
Or something? No. Okay.
No. He's in hospice care at the moment.
He is. Okay, because I know he sort of went off the grid. Nobody knew what happened to him, and then
he got. I think what I have heard, he got beaten.
Yeah, I had heard that.
So now he's in a hospice, and I think he's not even really.
Shout out to Louie.
Yeah. So it was like I would get flack from the hip hoppers, like, "What is that crazy music you listen to?" And then downtown, people were like, "What the fuck are you hanging out with all these like black guys uptown?" Like,
what's funny about that is they're both musical. They're both music. Genres of music that came out of people not fitting into what was overarching stereotypical music of the time.
Absolutely, and it was exciting.
Like punk rock is the antithesis of the big arena tours that bands were doing at the time. It was DIY. It was $6,000 to record the first Ramones record. Like. And hip hop was, we're not into disco, we're not into R&B and funk. Like, I mean, there's elements of it in there, just like there's elements of stadium rock and rock and roll, but it's in reaction to that stuff.
Totally. I'm glad you see that because a lot of people didn't back then.
But you know what the funny part is? They're both also very tribal.
Yeah.
Super tribal. Like, you're with your crew because this is where I belong. I don't belong anywhere else. I belong here. And I identify with me as this person, and this is who I am, and I belong. And by the way, isn't this funny? Anybody who's not like me, that's a problem.
Totally.
That's a problem because...
But I was never like that. And
Yeah.
I would like scene jump all the time. So I would go down to Roxy's. That was like this big place, like Roxy's. Like that was the place for hip hop in the beginning in New York. Palladium, like all these places, and not Palladium, sorry. And I would like go down to Roxy's, hang out at Roxy's, and then like the next weekend I'd go down to CB's. Mm-hmm. So it was like I like did like the skipping.
Yep.
So by the time this had happened, I actually started to sort of distance myself from both scenes. And I was hanging out locally in my neighborhood. And we used to all meet on the 89th Street Soldiers and Sailors Monument on Riverside. Mm-hmm. And then you had everybody, all the neighborhood kids. And I come from an eclectic, culturally, financially, neighborhood in all of New York. The Upper West Side was like the hub of interracial, interfinancial,
intereconomic,
all of it. The best place. I'm so grateful for that. So we would meet at the monument, and there would be, we'd all have a music, and we'd get, back then it wasn't even 40s. It was like we had quarts. We had quarts. We had quarts, and we had half gallons of Canadian Ace, Jeez. Which was like nasty. But we would like smoke weed, drink beer, and then, the hippies would come, deadheads. Then we would have hip hoppers, then we'd have metalheads, and we would have punk rock, and we would have this, and we'd have all these people hanging out with each other, breaking on each other, intercultural, interracial. We would make fun of each other. People would call me a big fat Jew head. Other people would, like...
Well, you go to jail in the UK for that now.
Really?
Yeah, kind of.
And we just had so much fun with each other. Everyone had a nickname. It was like Gary, who was Puerto Rican. We had Biagio, who was Black. We had Jojo, who was half Spanish, half Thai or Chinese. I can't remember. We had Johnny, we had Albie, who was like half Japanese, half Black. We had Lincoln, who was Jew. We had Sean. We had Mike. We had all of these like people, and we would all break on each other. All of us. And it was like super cool. And then, so I started to get into some metal. So it was the metal phase now.
Okay.
So I got it into...
The latest of them, if you keep track of them as they go by.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, I never had heard of Black Sabbath before. And I discovered Black Sabbath at 16. I don't know. I just never...
How do you go through...
It wasn't my radar. It wasn't on my radar.
I mean...
Isn't that weird?
That's really weird.
I like my friend Kenny, shout out Kenny. He turned me on to Sabbath, Venom, like all of that, like all happened at once. It was like Sabbath, Venom, Slayer. Yeah.
I mean, I can appreciate them, but I've never been like a giant Slayer fan.
Me neither. Totally not. Metallica,
they're a good band.
All of this.
Metallica. I mean, I'm looking at going to see Metallica in May. I haven't seen them in forever.
So that happened, and so I was just hanging out uptown. I like avoided downtown. Mm-hmm. Avoided like the hip hoppers. It was all too.
Yeah.
Like so close-minded. And so what we would do is like everyone would like fight for their tapes. So sometimes we'd listen to the Dead, and people would be like, "Oh my God, right. You freaking hippie! Like we don't want to hear this." And then we put Venom on. People like, and then so and then Bad Brains, and then whatever, So it was just like everyone kind of benefited from each other. Oh, I just loved that time. It was a fantastic time in my life.
What a great band, Bad Brains.
Yeah, the first. You want to hear the funniest thing? The first Bad Brains record I got, I listened. It was a single, but when the singles were big, it wasn't like a 7-inch. It was I don't remember what it was, but I played it on 33, and I thought, God, he's got a deep voice.
Oh yeah, well,
and I didn't.
HR's voice is not deep,
and I didn't know that it was supposed to be on 45.
45.
And I was listening to it, and I was like, everybody talks about the Bad Brains. They're kind of weird. It's kind of slow and weird. And then my friend Gary, who's also dead now, God rest his soul, that's Kenny's brother, was like, you big. He was like, that's supposed to be a 45.
First Bad Brains CD I ever got was fittingly enough, I bought it at a record store in Georgetown in DC, fittingly enough. And a friend of mine who was an old punk rocker I was hanging out for the weekend there. They're like, yeah, you should try out this band. I'm like, what are they? He's like, they're a hardcore band. I'm like, I'm not really into hardcore. He's like, no. It's just,
you gotta hear this.
You gotta hear this. And I was just blown away. I heard Eye Against Eye, and that was it. And I just found every record. I found every bootleg live CD I could find. Yeah. It was like the Misfits. Like I have every bootleg live CD probably ever made by the Misfits. And that band's great. I mean, super interesting story. It's a whole rabbit hole, but yeah, what a great band.
Amazing.
Yep. So everybody's beating each other up and busting on each other to play their tape.
Yeah, but like super fun, like all in good fun, all great.
Yeah.
And then I fell in love for the very first time in my life.
You fell in love for the first time.
Yeah.
So you're 16?
16.
It's about the right age.
Yeah. And still a virgin.
Mm-hmm.
Like as wild as I was, I just wasn't.
You just weren't like in the guys stuff, like romance.
I mean, I guess I was, but I was just sort of really, I didn't have like a libido or anything.
Okay.
It was just sort of like, I was like late bloomer. I didn't even really get, like, I didn't even start to like have menstruations until I was like 15, 16.
Okay.
So it was like, I was just late with everything. And I just wanted to hang out, I was just hanging out, like having fun and partying, but I wasn't like about to be sleeping around or something like that.
So you fell in love.
So I fell in love. And unfortunately, my first love was dating my best friend. So,
I mean, sure.
Well, I was in love with him first.
This is important.
Yeah, but I never said anything. It was just like, I was so much one of the guys that it would almost be like gay.
Right.
Like, what? Like, stop being so gay. Like it would have been like that, like.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't say anything. And then he met this girl, Ingrid.
My daughter's name.
Yes. And she actually became my roommate, and we lived together, and we had a very long drug history, Ingrid and I. But I became friends with Ingrid. He introduced, Mike was his name, introduced Ingrid to our crew. And, if you can't beat him, join him. So I was silently in love with Mike for like 2 years, like a year and a half. And like, it was just so hurtful to have them around and see them with each other. It was just like, oh, it broke my heart every time. And so Ingrid just could not, like, we became good friends, and she would just always say, like, I cannot be with Mike. I cannot be with Mike anymore. I just cannot. He's just too possessive. He's too this, he's too that. And then she was like, how do I break up with him? How do I do that? Like, he won't even let me break up with him. Like, I'm not even in love with him. I don't even really like him anymore. So I confessed to her that I had been in love with him for all this time. And she was like, I would never have known it. And I was like, yeah, well, I would never have like got in between that, like that's not something I would do. And she was like, please just go out with him. Try and go out with him. Please just get him off of me. Like.
I mean, you're being a good friend, right?
Yes.
You want to wrap it in logic?
Yeah, exactly. Being a good friend. So basically, she breaks up with him.
Mm-hmm.
And months go by, and he's just mourning the whole time, like always complaining, so upset. And of course, I was there for him because we were always friends anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And one night, he just, like, we were out and we were talking, and then he just like realized, and we just like kissed on that night. It was like one of my favorite, one of my first like kisses and all of that stuff. And we became a couple, and decided we didn't want any more city life, didn't want to do drugs anymore, didn't want to do anything like that anymore.
So you're doing drugs, but it's still like glue, weed, that kind of stuff? Not
even glue. Glue was like a couple of months.
Okay, got it. Okay.
It was just like weed and beer.
Yeah, okay.
And I tried coke, but didn't like it. And crack was big, so I tried that too, and just didn't like that, and just left it. Like, I actually wasn't addicted at all at that time. There was like I would have never gone myself to get beer or weed unless I was with my friends. So I just, like, I had no, like, there was no drug or alcohol that I wanted all the time. I just wasn't interested. Actually, it made me sick, and weed made me totally paranoid. So
I have no experience, never done it, but I've heard it can do that.
yeah, so I wasn't like attached.
Mm-hmm.
So so we decided like we're going to stop smoking weed, we're going to do all this stuff, and we're going to move to Woodstock,
New York.
Yeah. So we go to Woodstock. We went to, what's it called? It starts with an F. Phoenix. There's like a famous waterfall intertubing place there too.
I don't know that part of New York so well.
Yeah, so it starts with an F. Phoenix. It sounds like Phoenix, but it's not Phoenix.
By the way, side note, not D. Simmons, D. Snyder.
D. Snyder.
Sorry, it's gonna bother me the whole time. D. Snyder is the lead singer for Twisted Sister. I'm thinking of Gene Simmons.
Gene Simmons, yeah, and I thought he's mixing.
People that are listening to this for like the first 25 minutes or 4 hours. They're gonna be like, "You don't know anything about that band." It's D. Snyder.
Of course, it's
an S word. It was an S word. Anyway.
Of course.
Anyway, so
funny.
So you moved to Woodstock.
We moved to Woodstock, and we were really close. I got a job being a nanny and building houses, so I did both.
I mean, because those are actually those both make sense. They jive together like peanut butter and jelly, right? Like you like building houses with the baby strapped to your chest.
No, I was like the grunt helping build houses,
mm-hmm.
and it was only part time.
Mm-hmm.
And the nanny was also only part time, so I did
both.
Oh, so it was nice.
Nice. And you're in Woodstock.
And I'm in Woodstock.
And you're in love, and everything is golden.
Everything's great. And then I get bored.
Well, that's a problem.
Yeah, then I get bored. And then I realized how clingy my boyfriend is and how much no free time that I have and it started to get just weird. And we lived in this really small little like cabin. And it was just like, it was a dream, but when it was reality, it was just like, what the hell? You know, like, this is like, we're like in the sticks. There was like an inbred family down the street with like small heads and junkyard in their front yard. So it was kind of creepy even.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept saying, oh, go down to the city for the weekend. And it became more and it became more. And then he became more possessive. I became more like, get away. And then
oh, I mean, that happens in relationships. The harder you hold on, you know.
So I was 18 at this point. And I finally got the courage to break up with Mike. Mm-hmm. He still doesn't talk to me to this day. And which is weird. And he's still friends with my brother.
Huh. And I guess time doesn't heal all wounds?
No, it doesn't. I guess, I don't know. Whatever. I feel bad. I always feel guilty about that. But yeah, so break up with him, decide I have to do something with my life, go to beauty school to learn to be a hair cutter.
Okay. I'm just thinking of all the jobs that we've gone through so far in the short span of time that you've been on the planet. At this point, it's like professional skinhead, hitchhiker, scene hopper,
beauty school dropout.
Yeah, I think there's a song about that one. House builder, nanny. Am I missing anything?
It gets better. Yeah. Then I became a bartender. I don't even know.
Well, I mean, if you live in New York, everybody's a bartender at some point.
Yeah.
Or in the service, industry at some point.
Yeah. So I do that. Then I finish actually and work for about 4 months in the industry as I worked at this place called Pierre Michel, which was at the top of Trump Towers. I actually originally started to do it so that I can work in the theater and do makeup and hair for the theater.
Okay.
But for some reason, anything that was given to me, I didn't want.
Why?
I don't know. I just had to do it myself.
Anything is like
my dad's like, I can get you this. I can do this for you.
Right,
I can get you that. I can hook you up. I can get you in a commercial. I can do this. I can do that.
Right.
I just didn't do it. I just was like, no, doing it myself.
And
No, messing it up myself. Thank you, please. Not gonna ruin it all by myself. I
don't need your help.
I don't need your help to ruin it. I can ruin everything myself.
On my own. Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So, it was the year of perms, like everyone was getting perms. So I was
okay,
like,
this is like 88?
No, earlier even. I think it's just like 87.
Because my mom had a perm sometime.
Yeah, it was.
80s, so, okay.
Yeah, it was that time. So I was like, I'm not doing this, man. No way. Like, all I do is perms all day. Anyway, I dropped out of that. Stopped that. I got my license. I passed the practical test, but didn't pass the written because I never showed up for the written test.
But you're living in New York at this point.
I'm living at my dad's house.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're 18, and Mike's gone.
Mike's gone. I'm free. Don't have a boyfriend again. Just didn't. Wasn't really on the radar, actually. I was just so happy to be free.
And then what?
And then there was one guy who hung around at the monument where I was talking about. I was just hanging, doing nothing good, just hanging out. And so there's this guy, he's still alive. He probably won't listen to this. His name is Dave. We used to call him Dusty Dave because he used to smoke a lot of dust. And then
that's angel dust for anybody who doesn't know what that.
I had a phase with that stuff too, actually. But he started getting into heroin. So we used to call him Dusty Dave Methadone Crave. That was like
that shouldn't be funny, but it certainly wraps around the tongue easy.
It was pretty funny. And so Dave, I was hanging out with Doug, who was a good friend of mine from Texas, who I met in boarding school at Happy Valley, and his dad lived in New York.
Got it.
Doug was fresh in New York, and I was trying to and he started hanging out with Dave. And I never hung out with Dave because Dave was a drug addict. And I went to Doug's house, and Dave was there. And I was like, oh, what's up, Dave? And he was like, and he used to talk like this. He'd be like, yo, what's up, Gwen? He'd talk like this. I've
met a few people who talk like that.
Yeah. And he'd be like, yo, what's up, Gwen? He was like, yo, I'm going to go cop uptown. You want a bag? And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And so we just started. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll try it. So I tried it.
So that was your first time trying heroin?
It was my first time trying heroin. I was 19.
And so what's different? Because you're doing drugs before then. You even said, I didn't get addicted to this. I didn't get it,
Yeah.
So what's different?
That heroin gave me a feeling like being back in like a space womb, like a womb in space. It was just like the most blissful feeling I've ever felt in my life. All the noise in my head stopped. All the nervousness stopped. All the anxiety stopped. It was like as if it was like the cure.
Mm-hmm.
And
you mean you think it's the cure for not fitting in, or the anxiety that surrounds the feeling that my life's been chaotic. Your life's been chaotic for the last 12,
it was like as if everything stopped. The noise stopped.
Right.
All the noise stopped. Whatever the noise was,
mm-hmm.
It stopped immediately, and I felt like this was peace. It was peace and quiet, which I never had. Peace and quiet. Okay, everything stopped, and it became I almost even believed it. It became like the real who I was. I got in touch with. It was almost godly.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very, very hard to explain that to somebody, but that's how it was. So I didn't really know anything. Believe it or not, I was super naive to heroin. I didn't know anyone who used it. It was just Dave, sort of, and I didn't know the consequences. And because the way I used drugs before, it was take it or leave it. I just thought it would be the same thing.
Right. I just do it once. That was interesting, but whatever. I'm not an addict.
Well, yeah, I didn't even like those thoughts never even crossed my mind. An addict, not addict. It was just like I just party and have fun. Like that was all. There was no like, and believe it or not, the only like people who I ever knew were on heroin were like these 40-year-old, 50, 60-year-old guys in wheelchairs in Harlem, you know? And so it's like, yeah, you know, I always thought in my head, this is the weirdest thing in hindsight. I'm wondering like, how did I just not know that? I thought you'd had to take it for 20 years in order to be addicted. I didn't know you can be addicted within a few weeks. No clue. None. No clue. When I had my first withdrawal, I didn't even know I was withdrawing. I thought I had a flu. I was like, what the hell is wrong with me? And I called Dave. I was like, what's wrong with me? He was like, you're going through withdrawal. I was like, what? I've only been doing it for like 2 weeks. And he was like, 2 weeks? He was like, of course you're going to go with withdrawal. I was like, I thought you had to do it for like 30 years. And he was like, are you out of your mind? And I was like, oh my God. And then I stopped. I was like, okay, fuck this. I'm not dealing with this. This is crazy. I don't want to ever do that again. So the next time I use, I'll just use it sometimes.
And thus the logic begins. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It shouldn't. It's not, right?
It's funny now.
But I mean, it's interesting, right? About how the mind wraps it will do gymnastics to get
to rationalize anything.
To rationalize what you want. I have a really good teacher who says that the mind will do anything to rationalize its own bad behavior.
Oh my God, it's so true, though.
I mean,
it's so true.
Yeah.
So true. So true.
I mean, you just think about, I think about the mental gymnastics I would jump through to do all the things I thought would make me happy in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, you're not happy at the end of it, but there's almost a sunk cost because I did all this work to get to where I was. And now I don't have the thing that I thought I was going to have, but I did all this work. So, you know, in business, we call that a sunk cost fallacy, right? Like I put all this money in and at the end of it, I didn't make any money. I should keep putting more money in.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, no. The thing you did didn't get you what you wanted.
So
your first loss is your best loss. Just stop right now.
I absolutely. Oh my God, that's so funny. That's a great comparison. A really great comparison. I call it the anything but me. Anything but me.
What do you mean?
Just try to make yourself happy. Anything but me. Fill it. Fill that.
Right.
Anything but me. I mean, it was kind of a jump from what you said, but
no,
a part of it related to that. It's just that, like, I'm doing this to make me happy. I'm doing this. Everything I tried to fulfill something, even if it was not like conscious. Mm-hmm. Like it's not a conscious. Like I wouldn't consciously say I want to do drugs so I can be happy. I would just say I want to do drugs because it's fun or whatever, but not like it's not going to make me happy. It's not like a conscious thing.
Right. It's almost subconscious. I mean, that's part of addiction too, right?
Oh my God, totally.
I mean, so
until it flips. When it flips, it's like you just get it to get better.
Right.
Like that's the sick part. Like it's like I'm not using it. I don't get high anymore. It's just I don't want to be sick.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's really, really bad.
So you're 19 at that point?
Yeah, I think it's about that age. 19.
Yeah. And so up until this point, I mean, and this is why I find your story really interesting. It is because usually, I mean, having grown up as a teenager in the punk scene, you know, I saw people who were on all sorts of drugs, and I never did drugs. It just really never interested me. Mm-hmm. I drank. And, you know, at one point I drank a lot. I don't think I ever really had a problem, but I probably drank more than a person should. Definitely more than a normal person. And usually what happened is people would get into the scene. There were people you knew who were drug addicts in the scene. And for me, I just sort of stayed away from them. I was like, look, I'm not into that. I don't want to go to the parties you're going to because I'm not interested in the stuff that you're doing at those parties. And so if you're at a show, whatever, I'll say hi to you. I'm not going to be a jerk to you, but like we're just not hanging out. But people would start hanging out with those people. And then, you know, invariably they would start doing drugs.
What they were doing. Yeah,
what they were doing.
Exactly.
You know, particularly if they were new to the scene and they sort of gravitated towards them for one reason or another. And then they, you know, maybe they thought that's what you did when you got into this stuff or for whatever. Yeah. And so that was like the very usual story. You get in. You start going to shows, you start dressing a certain way, and then that becomes part of the outfit that you're putting on, that behavior. And, do drugs. I mean, it's fine, And so that's why I find your story super interesting, because that's not where any of that happened.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Isn't that weird?
It is weird. I mean, it's unusual.
And even the people who were on heroin back then, in hindsight, I didn't even know they were. I just thought they were drunk because I didn't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
I was pretty naive when it came to heroin. I mean, it wasn't like, there was like a couple. There was like Junkie Joe Nails and Bambi, his wife. They were just like, we laughed at them, which is not funny, but we laughed at them. They were like Sid and Nancy. And we just were like, oh God, like I didn't even know what kind of drugs they were on. They would just be sleeping all the time. And I was like, God, what's wrong with them? They're destroyed. But I didn't even like.
I mean, it's interesting. I grew up in the don't do drugs era. War on drugs, DARE was a thing in school.
Yeah. And
there's a whole lot of stuff coming out about that now. And there's a lot of people who have opinions on that. And that's, for probably another entire podcast series. But for whatever reason, it had a big effect on me. I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to do drugs because it looks like, and actually getting into the punk scene reinforced the fact that I didn't, because then I'd never met anybody who did drugs at all. But people had told me it was bad. People who, I always had a problem with authority, but that didn't mean that I thought that teachers didn't know anything. So people in my life told me it was not a good idea. And then I went to shows. And I saw drug addicts. And all I remember the first time I saw somebody who I knew was on heroin. I'm sure I'd met somebody before then.
Yeah.
But the first time somebody was like, that person's on heroin. And all I could think of was, they're like miserable. They're just like falling all over the place. They're tired. They're pale. They look unhealthy. And they just don't look like they're having any fun at all. And so I thought, well, I don't want to do that. And then I would like meet people who smoked weed. And I remember, because I toured with guys who smoked weed and it was fine. But I remember, we didn't have I came from a pretty upper echelon economic family. But when I was going to shows, like my parents didn't give me any money. I mean, I would like mow lawns and stuff. And so I had what I had. And so if I was gone for a weekend at shows, it was like, all right, I got enough money to buy a couple of 40s, eat, and pay to get into these shows. Yeah. And I don't have money to spend on weed. I just don't. Like I don't have money for that. So that seems really dumb to me. Like I don't like to smoke anyway. Cigarettes are disgusting, and this is just a cigarette to me. So anyway, my point is, that was how I always experienced it. And so your story is very unusual insofar as where I come from. And we come from the same place, albeit different time periods. Yeah. So like, so you go through withdrawal and then you just decide, well, I'm just gonna do it occasionally, once in a while.
Yeah.
How'd that work out?
It was good for about a month or two.
Yeah, okay.
Then it was like, yeah, just do it on the weekend, and then the weekend turned to this day, and then that day, and then I realized, okay, it's starting to go down that road that I'm addicted. I started to realize that I'm really jonesing for this. Like I want it all the time, and that scared me. So I stopped. I stopped for about 6 months, oh my God, this is such a crazy story. So I decided I was playing in a band, and I decided I wanted to go to music school. So my dad, of course, said, okay, you can go to music school. And I went out to LA and went to this music school of technology in Hollywood. Long story. Met my boyfriend, the next boyfriend, Jason, who's also passed. Killed himself a couple of years ago, actually, I think.
Yeah.
I think he killed himself. I just read that he's passed. Tragic story of Jason. Really tragic. I'm getting quiet again, but
that's okay.
Anyway, no, I'm not quiet because of that. I'm just quiet because I didn't realize it. I don't know if we want to get into that whole thing.
I mean, you go to LA and like, This is LA probably in the late 80s.
88, 89.
Yeah, 88, 89. So this is like Poison, Guns N' Roses.
Yes.
Oh, and there's not a...
Yes,
and
exactly.
It's not like there's a heroin culture in the music scene out there at that point.
Yeah, not at all, right? So I go to music school. I'd already met my... So, all right. So where I went to boarding school in Happy Valley, went to boarding school in Happy Valley. I met this guy named Johannes from Germany, who was dating Lisa Presley at the time. And he's the son of a famous German composer. And Johannes was a musician and an artist, and he went to Cal Arts.
Okay.
So I went to go visit Johannes in Cal Arts, and that's where I met Jason.
Okay.
So that just...
Got it. It all comes full circle.
Right. So we start dating, and I'm dating Jason. And he's total alcoholic. Punk rock, skater.
Yep.
Weed smoking, sort of, but really drinker. And horrible story. So I have my apartment. He has his apartment. And we were really, really close. And one day I come home from school, and it was our anniversary. It was like our 6-month anniversary or something like that. And we were supposed to go out to dinner and do something really nice. And he answers the phone, and there's like Misfits. Like, this is why I can't listen to certain Misfits songs anymore. Mm-hmm. There's one in particular, and I'll tell you why afterwards.
Sure.
Lots of some scars there. And he answers the phone completely sloshed. And then he's like, we're going to cancel. I got all these people over here. So that was it. And then he hang up. And I was like, what the hell? Call again. And he just picks up and hangs the phone up. And I was like, oh, okay. My New York is like, oh, okay. You want to do like this? Honey, no, that's not happening. So I grabbed my skateboard. I skate over to his house. And I knew something was up. Something really bad. I have the key to his apartment. I go into the apartment. I'm opening the door, and he heard that I was coming in, and he opened the door completely naked with, like, Yep. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, what the hell is going on here? And then he tried to close the door, and I was not having it. So I put my foot in the door, and there's some girl, of course. And I was heartbroken. I was like, what the hell is going on? Needless to say, I'm ashamed to even tell this story, but we literally, I brawled. Mm-hmm. I started throwing fists and whatever. So the girl, I kick her out, drag her out by the hair, throw her shit out in the hallway. Mm-hmm. He's crying in the corner, drunk. And I'm pacing in the kitchen, totally angry. And I can't take it anymore, so I leave. Mm-hmm. I go down to this 7-Eleven, whatever it was. I down a little flask of whiskey or whatever it was. I don't know, just down it. And I'm like, okay, I got to go back. I can't handle this. So I go back. I skate back to his house. And they're in bed again. Ugh. And I was like, okay. And that's when I really freaked out. I took my skateboard, and his nose was broken. And it was bad. It was really bad. Really, really bad. Blood, everything. I was just, it's horrible to talk about it. So I'm in the kitchen again, and two of her friends, Greg and Kathy, of his friends, Greg and Kathy, I'll never forget them. They come around, and I'm in the kitchen, panting, literally, almost losing my... Yeah. And so Greg and Kathy are at the window, and they were like, what the hell is going on? And I told them what was going on. They lived in the Hollywood Hills. And I said, get me out of here. Get me out of here. And they were junkies. So I had a relapse.
Yeah, so they really got you out of there.
They got me out of there. So I had a relapse. I stayed at their house for 3 days. I partied with him and the old drummer for Guns N' Roses.
Okay.
He was there. We were partying in Hollywood Hills. And it was about a 3-day binge. And I was back to the races. And then it started to get really bad. And then...
So, I mean, how long did you end up using for?
Well, Jason came to pick me up at some point, and he started using heroin. So I created a monster. He became a horrible junkie and started stealing from me, stealing from friends, stealing from people. Horrible story.
Yeah.
I wanted to get clean after about 5-6 months. It took me about 3 or 4 months, 3 or 4 weeks. He would follow me to school. It wasn't using the whole time. After that 3-day period, I would try to get back to regular life and all that stuff. And Jason would show up at my doorstep every day and beg me to take him back. And I just wasn't having it. I was like, God, just get away from me. I was so angry. I'd never trust you again, ever. Like, are you kidding me? You're scumbag. Like, that's the most disgusting thing that's ever happened to me. And this is never going to happen to me again, you know? And he begged me for about 3 or 4 weeks. I would say really a long time. And one day he was like, just give me a half an hour. Give me a half an hour. And just let me say what I have to say, and then I'll never bother you again. And he had a car, and I didn't. And I wanted to use. So I said, well, give me a ride down to downtown LA. I can cop something. And you can have your half an hour, and everything's great. So we get to downtown LA, and he was like, okay, but now you have to get some for me. And I was like, no, definitely not. And so he just went behind me. He copped bags after me, and I refused to give him anything. And that was it. We were Sid and Nancy after that. Got together, used that night, made up, knotted out. It was disgusting. I can't even, this is I've not talked about this in so long.
Well, you said it made you feel, like at peace, right? Yeah. And I think we've known each other for 5 years, and I think, you've certainly led, and I mean, just even up to 19, it's not what you would call a standard life, right? It's pretty. I mean, you hitchhiked to the West Coast at 14. Well, look, so you guys make up.
Yeah.
Things get worse, as tends to happen when you're an addict. I mean,
totally disgusting.
I mean, and it's LA in 1988, 89, which is, I mean, again, so I'm 5 or 6 at this point, right? But I grew up with those bands and that lore, and I know stories, and I know people that grew up during that time in that area. And so it was not like wine and roses and glitz and glamour.
You know what the funny thing is, though? I actually met the guys from the Angry Samoans, and I started to play bass for them.
Okay.
And then they kicked me out because I was a junkie. But
No. I mean, so, I mean, from 88, I mean, how long did it go on?
Well, so I wound up dropping out of music school because I have a habit.
Right.
No way that I can go to school and feed my habit. So I started. I don't even want to go. I might even open that book.
Okay.
Doesn't matter because it's just too long and it's just a funny story, but it doesn't really matter. So basically, at some point, I wind up wanting to go home and get clean, and Jason was not having it. He wanted.
Why do you think that is? So, because I know some of your other stories that we've talked about, and what, when is enough enough? Like, what's the thing that's like, where's the line? Like, okay, yeah, now enough is enough.
Well, it's like, it's the constant getting dope sick and constant trying to kick and constantly being like sucked back into the life and not having the willpower. And it's like the up and the down. And it's like, at this point it has turned. It's not a beautiful place anymore. Mm-hmm. Now it's just like avoidance. Now it's like, I don't have the willpower to stop. And I don't want to get sick, so I have to feed the monster. Mm-hmm. You're constantly feeding the monster. And that's when the misery starts. That's when the life is the getting and finding and getting means and ways to have more and more and more. And more is not enough anymore. You need more and then more. And then you need more and more and more. And then you're not even getting high anymore. You're just getting straight.
Right.
And then the constant overdoses. I was a chronic overdoser. I've had 18 overdoses. So it just started to get like...
Why do you think it is? Because I've much more limited experience than you, or But it always seemed to me that the people that died around me when I was younger were, I mean, there were some heroin addicts I knew that passed away, but they always died of like other stuff. The heroin addicts that I knew, there were some that like lived for 30 years, and I could never figure out.
Died.
I mean, because the drug's so destructive, and it's and I'm just like, I don't understand how.
Well, there's people who don't overdose. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't overdose. Mm-hmm. I was very sensitive, and this is the weird thing. I was always very sensitive, and like I couldn't handle a lot, even when I would drink. Mm-hmm. Like I would drink like a beer and be sloshed. Right. Like I can't drink. I have a very low tolerance of anything that's foreign, and that's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like I never like. Anyway. But
so you decide you're going back to the East Coast to get clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
like 90.
I think it's still 89.
Still 89.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Still 89. And get back to New York. I kicked on my dad's couch. And
were you going to rehab, or was it just like you just sort of muscled through it?
I just muscled through it. And and I also started to play in a band. But meanwhile, as I got clean, I still didn't stop doing everything else, but didn't really do a lot. Just have a drink here and there and do whatever. But I just didn't. And I get a phone call about 2 months after I broke up with Jason. I come home and my answering machine, and that's another song. Nothing Compares to You is on the answering machine, and he is calling me as he's bleeding out because he's tried to kill himself, and he's saying goodbye to me on the phone on the answering machine, which is so dramatic, but like just so ugly. So I'm freaking out. Like I call his parents. I find his parents. So he almost died. Mm-hmm. He like literally cut his jugular
vein, yeah.
Or I don't know, yeah, cut all the veins, like cut everything. Was bleeding out.
Right.
And they got him just in time. And then I just sort of cut off contact because I just thought that was just so. It was just so dark,
So you kicked.
I kicked. That was done. And I started to, because I played bass, so I was looking for a band. I started hanging out with the guys from Leeway, and like sort of like hanging out at the Wawa Hut. Everybody knows New York. It was like the Wawa Hut, and like started hanging there and just getting other like. It was like Lower East Side, and I was just sort of chill, just normal, not really doing anything. And then I became really good friends with this girl, Liz, who played in a band called Wench and PMS. I don't know if you remember them.
No.
All girls metal band.
Gotcha.
She was a junkie.
Here we go.
Here we go again. So Liz was Zowie. Zowie was the bass player in Leeway at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So Liz was his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like super good friends. So how to relapse. I was playing in a band called Karen Black at the time, which was like a performance art band, like really weird. And they were in the program. Samoa and Kembra were the head up of those bands. They were in NA.
They were in the 12-step program.
They were in NA. And and then as I was relapsing, I was playing with them. They realized I was relapsing, and they brought me to my very first NA meeting.
Okay.
Downtown, the artist meeting, Lower East Side.
Mm-hmm.
I dug it, but I was like, eh.
I'm not a joiner.
Yeah. I wouldn't be a part of any club that would have me.
Yeah, right. Groucho Marx.
Yeah.
I'm not a joiner.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I say that jokingly, but I mean, it's the attitude if you're in that scene, right? Like,
Totally.
I don't trust authority. I'm not a joiner. I'm
Totally.
my own thing.
I'll do it on my own if I can.
I'm my own person. By the way, I wear the same stretch jeans and torn band shirt as everyone else. And if the music doesn't fit into this little box, it's crap. But I'm not a joiner. I'm an individual.
Is that hysterical?
Well, I mean, that's what the mind does, right?
It really does.
It justifies
and rationalizes
its own screwed up behavior.
Absolutely.
I mean, particularly the reactive mind.
Oh my God, yeah.
I mean, it's the beauty of like the yoga system and Vedic philosophy is that you have the reactive mind, and that's the part that does that.
Oh yeah.
That judges immediately, and many people live on that mental platform, right?
Yes.
And then you have that ego, right? That false ego that basically writes your own story. It's not the real story, but it's the story you write for yourself. And then you have that discerning part of the mind, which is able to actually say, really? I mean, I know you think that about yourself, but is that really true?
Really? Fact or feeling?
Yeah, like, your feelings aren't necessarily facts.
Yes.
And what is it, Viktor Frankl, who says between stimulus and response is in any case.
I love Frankl. Anyway,
yeah, Man's Search for Meaning is a great book.
Yeah, agreed.
and so, but that's what the reactive mind does. And so often, I mean, particularly now, that everything that you see online, that you see if you read a paper, the news, everything is meant to get your reactive mind to just immediately click on and ignore that more discerning part of your mind.
So true.
So true. Therein lies like a lot of problems we probably have. And so you go to NA, and the reactive part of your mind is like, well, yeah, I'm not a joiner. I mean, it's interesting, whatever, but like, I don't join things. I don't join things.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't like really. I mean, I liked what they had to say.
Yeah,
it was a cool vibe, and
yeah,
everything was fine. But I just didn't really get it. I was in my own world. It was like I was doing my own thing in my own world. That's it. So,
but for two really good friends, right? You don't go to NA.
No.
And were they really good friends, or were they just people?
They were band members.
They were band members.
Yeah.
But you'd only known them for like a couple months, 6 months. Yeah. So it's not like a parent, a family member.
No.
It's almost strangers.
Yeah.
Who saw that you were in a bad spot and were like, hey, why don't you come hang out with me for a night with a bunch of other people who are in a bad spot?
That's exactly what it was. Exactly what it was.
I mean, that's why I still buy into the kindness of strangers.
Yeah.
Like there's a human element, right?
There
to
really
people that even in now, even when maybe people are more self-absorbed than they normally are, there's still a human element where somebody is bleeding out on the street. Any rational person's going to stop by and be like, wait, okay, let me put my hand on you. Let me call. I'm going to call 911. What's your name? Sure. Where do you live? Like, and so I don't know. I often think that people are inherently decent people. Too, yes. I mean, look, and our philosophy sort of tells you that, like, your default nature is actually to love people. Yeah. That's the default coding on your soul. But everything you would hear in media would tell you that it's counter to that. everything here in business is counter to that. You have to be like, it's take no prisoners. You have to be cutthroat. I've just never experienced that in my life.
So nice.
Or the times that I have tried to be like that, it's like the clothes don't fit. It's like I'm wearing clothes that are like totally. 2 sizes too small, and I'm not comfortable, and my stomach is sticking out, and the buttons are
poking.
And I'm trying to I'm gonna lay on the bed to get my jeans buckled. Anyway, maybe I'm just describing my normal body dysmorphia. Anyway, right. So, okay. So then why do you go, what makes you go back?
To NA?
Yeah.
Bottom. I had a bottom. I mean, there's like so many more stories. Like, sure. I don't even know where this is even like.
Well, you've got an interesting thing to tell because you spend all your life helping people.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what you do now, right?
That's what I do.
You spend your life.
That's what I do.
In working with people with 12-step.
Yeah.
Working with it under
the Bhakti lens.
Yeah, through the lens of Bhakti Yoga. Mm-hmm. Right? So, you hit a bottom.
I did.
And it's one of many.
One of many.
But what's different about that one? I mean, because you hit all these other, was it the next bottom you hit after an NA meeting and it was like, oh, there's somewhere I can go, or were there many? And
there were so many. I was in and out of the program for 8 years.
The NA program?
Yeah. Before I could.
What do you mean like in and out?
AA.
NA.
Like going to meetings.
Like I go to one meeting, I don't go for a bunch, and then I go for a while.
Like I'd go to 30 meetings every day for a whole month, or I even got a year together clean, all that kind of stuff.
You mean NA just doesn't fix the problem the first time you go?
Yeah, it does.
No, okay. No. That's not how that works?
That's not how it works. Actually, funnily enough, I actually got clean and sober in AA. I just found the program of AA a lot more structured and a lot more conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed that very much. NA was where I went to have fun and hang out with my peers,
mm-hmm.
and go to after meetings, to diners, and hang out and have fun and be crazy, but without all of the drugs and stuff.
Yep.
And the AA is where I grew up and learned to have a parent.
Gotcha.
So that was it. It was I literally, through the program, I raised myself to be, and the program raised me to be a responsible adult.
So what is it about the bottom that you hit that then finally got you sober? What do you think? And you don't have to go into a ton of detail about it, but
what's the difference?
What's the difference between that and all the other
the difference was that I have done everything that I said I was never going to do.
Okay.
I said I was never going to do this, and I did this for drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I said I was never going to do this, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was February. I was homeless. The custody of my daughter was gone. Well, not gone, but.
Are you in the States or Germany?
I'm in Berlin.
You're in Berlin, Germany. Yeah. So at some point you moved to Germany.
I moved to Germany, actually not far after we had just talked.
Got it. Okay.
About a year and a half after that, after just trying to get clean and sober all the time and whatever. And then I met a whole bunch of people. I was actually hanging out with Richie from Into Another, the band Into Another.
I know.
Underdog.
Yeah.
So Richie was a good friend of mine, just to rewind, just to get to Berlin.
Yeah.
And we were really, really good friends at the time. And we hung out a lot at that time. And there was this, a lot of Berliners who were sort of they were tour managers,
mm-hmm.
called Mad Productions.
Yeah, I know.
Productions. Yeah. So Mark and Uta. So Mark and his friends came over to New York, and Richie had asked me to take them around,
mm-hmm.
While he was at work, and just make them feel at home. And so I just hung out with them, showed them New York, and took them to all the bars, and took them to all the clubs, and just hung out. And they at some point invited me because we got along so well. They're like, "Just come out to Berlin and hang out with us." And I was sort of dibble-dabbling, sort of in and out. But I was still see, that's the thing. I tried to hide it from everybody. I was using heroin, but I didn't like you said, it's unusual, but the people I ran with on the hardcore scene and the punk scene, none of them did heroin. None of them did heroin. None of them. That was not on the menu.
Mm.
It was 40s smoking weed, some dust, maybe taking some acid trips or whatever, but no one was doing heroin.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jimmy, Roger, all these people, Vinny, like all these people.
You mean Roger from
Ignacio, yeah.
Yeah.
Like none of them were doing heroin. Like that wasn't like something that they were doing.
Right.
So it's not like that. It was like I just didn't get introduced to it. So I was trying to hide it from them. And I was hanging out with Elizabeth. We'd go to like Queens where she lived, and we would just like get lots of dope. And we had this like secret life.
Mm-hmm.
So
you end up in Berlin and you like it.
I love it.
And you decide to stay.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I thought, it's a geographical cue. I'm not going to use heroin here.
Of course, if you move to a new place, your problems don't follow you. That's how it works.
No, not at all. It was great. Perfect.
I don't know if I mentioned this, but the mind will do anything to justify its own bad behavior.
Yeah, I think something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
like if you know what? I'm going to date a different person, and all my problems are going to go away. Except all your problems are your problems, not that other person's problems.
It's so funny, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
What we think, what we used to think.
Well, it's because we think we're the center of the universe.
But I am.
Yeah, well, sure.
I mean,
why not?
obviously.
Right? I mean, because you think everything relates to you rather than you relating to everybody else,
Absolutely.
right? Like you think everything revolves around me.
Right.
I mean, that's and the reality is it doesn't. You actually revolve around everything else. But I often tell some of my students that I teach at yoga classes, or like when I go teach philosophy, I'll say, look, here's the thing. I have a problem. It's a very common one. This is my series. This is my Netflix series. It's mine. I am the main character. We're in season 41. And everybody around me, you're bit players. Some people sign on for multi-season contracts. My wife has been on a 10-season contract so far. It's working out pretty well. And sometimes once in a while, there's an ensemble cast episode where I'm not featured, but everybody's talking about me. So it's still about me. And that's how most people go through life, right? Like it's my Netflix series, right?
Do you want to hear something really funny?
What's
That's
that?
in the big book.
In the what book?
In the Alcoholics Anonymous big book. Exactly what you're saying is in the big book. I've
never read it, so.
Yes. Well, you're just reciting something. That's what we said. We are the actors, the leaders, the directors, and all of everything.
Well, here's the interesting intersection between that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I figured that out through Bhakti Yoga, right? That's where I had that realization of, I'm
not the knower and doer.
I think
I'm the knower and doer. Everything.
I think I'm in charge of everything. I'm actually not. And that's the biggest joke I've played on myself for the last, at that point, 35 years. But and we'll get to this. This is what you do. The crossover of those two things happens with you.
Yeah.
And then the program that you run.
Yeah.
So you get to Berlin. You have one of many, bottoms. And so, what is different about that bottom that gets you to finally hop off onto the wagon, so to speak?
I can give you 100 worldly reasons.
Okay.
But I think it was God. It wasn't me. It was literally something broke inside of me and made way for a flower to grow. That's how I can only describe it. The biggest material thing on the outside was that I had a daughter, and I didn't want to fail my daughter.
So how old's your daughter at this point?
3.
3. Yes, that's my daughter's age right now.
Yes. And I had just spent the first Christmas without her.
Mm.
I was in like a homeless shelter on Christmas, getting like charity Christmas stockings. This was like brutally horrible.
Right.
And it was February. I was in this shelter place. Not really a shelter. It's like in Germany it's different. They'll give you an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I was like in a bunkhouse or a flop house. It was like just an apartment. They give you one room with a little kitchenette, you know, sort of like that. And I leave the house. I go to this place where I'm supposed to be copying drugs. I go to this place. I didn't have my ID with me. And I was hungry, so I went to the supermarket and I stole some cookies to eat. And a bottle of whiskey to sell so I can get drugs. And because I didn't drink alcohol. That's poison.
The mind will do anything.
Yeah, anything. So, well, no, I just didn't like drinking. But anyway, so in Germany, you don't get arrested for stealing food.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not something that you... But if you steal food and you don't have ID, they'll take you.
Because you don't have your ID?
Well, because they have to identify who you are, because they'll give you a ticket.
This is the most German thing I've ever heard.
I know, it's not funny.
We're not going to arrest you for stealing food, but you don't have the proper papers, and so therefore we're going to arrest you.
It's exactly that.
That is the most German thing I think I've ever heard.
Exactly that. So they take me, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. And I'm like kicking, I'm jonesing. So like my body is not in a good place. And I'm like, damn it. So it becomes night. It becomes dark. It becomes late. And it was February. And it was one of those, you know how sometimes every once in a while you get this spring day in February and it's like freaking 70 degrees. So I have this like long sleeve t-shirt on and I had planned on going home anyway. I planned on just going there and leaving to go home. I didn't have a jacket. I didn't have anything. So that night I was held. They finally, finally, I don't know what they did. I can't even remember, but they processed me. Everything was fine. They let me go. It is freezing. It starts snowing. And I'm like, what the hell? And I'm freezing my ass off. And I'm like, literally, okay, so 49 kilos, which is disgusting. I'm now 70 kilos. So I'm half of what I was. Skin and bones. So I get on the subway to go to try to find something so I can get straight because I'm just jonesing. It was horrible. So I'm trying to get straight. I bought a cigarette from somebody. The train comes and I just decided, fuck, this is the middle of the night. There's hardly anyone here. I'm just going to keep smoking on the train. It's like, don't care. And then some like weird German guys are like, there's no smoking here. And then we get into this dispute. He turns up, like backhands me in the face. These two African guys are there and they're like, hey, what are you doing? Like they come to my defense and there's like this big thing going on. And then I just like leave, get off the train. The train stops. Go down to this place where I thought I might be able to get some drugs. And so I've told this story before, but it's imprinted in my surrender brain. So I get down, the street's frosted. It's completely empty. And it's a street really long and it goes all the way down and there's all these street lights. And you see the flakes of snow in the streams of light. The street's frosted. There's not a soul. It was literally like a ghost town. Empty. And I'm standing literally in the middle of this street, looking down that street. And this thought came in my head. Like, it wasn't even my thought. It was just like, hey, this cannot be the rest of your life. And it hit me so hard, like, this can't be the rest of your life. This is insanity. I turned around, went to a payphone, called my dad collect and said, get me home. Get me home. It took 4 days. Back then, Western Union, I don't know, all this stuff he had to do. He got me a ticket. I went home, kicked on his couch. I was 28. And I never used it again.
Started going to meetings again.
Was going to meetings. He sent me to a rehab in Chicago where my mother was living at the time. So it was like a day clinic rehab. They weren't going to take me. They said, because they asked me to tell my story and I told them everything. And they were like, okay, we can't help you. I mean, how is that? You don't qualify to go to a freaking rehab? Like, what the hell? You qualify to go to a rehab? What a reject! It was horrible.
Even the rehab doesn't want me.
Horrible. they're like, you've done everything. How many have you been? How many times have you quit? Like, what are we going to do for you? And we don't even trust you're going to stay clean.
Right.
So I was the only one in the day clinic that had to give urine every day. And I literally, it was not my energy. God was holding me. So I remember reading the literature, the NA and AA literature. And it was really difficult for me to accept this concept of a personal God, because I was raised atheist.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it was very embarrassing. And my father would always make fun of people who were religious. And he hated his own Jewish family. He's like, it's freaking ridiculous. Like, this is like that. It's not even like, it's all primitive. Like, only really primitive people believe in stuff like that. So it was like very unintelligent to believe in God in my household. So I picked up a book called The Tao of Physics. And there was another book I got recommended, was called Dancing Woolly Masters by a scientist named Gary Larson. No, that's the comic book guy, Gary Larson. Yeah. Gary Sukov.
Okay.
So Gary Sukov. So I picked up these books, and it kind of combined, because in the program they suggest that you find a higher power. And I just didn't really, I had no ties to Catholicism, no ties to Judaism, nothing. Okay, we're culturally Jewish, but only culturally,
right,
and politically. Religious was not a topic in my household. So I was just like, okay, so I had free range to try to discover who God was. And in reading these books, it was insane, because it took the science and it took like Eastern philosophies of the essence of what like God is, and just sort of combined them in a very scientific way, which spoke to me in ways that I didn't think. I just figured like I just discovered gold. Like I just became the richest person in the world. And so when I was reading step 2, step 1 is that step 1 is that we were powerless over our addictions and our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2 is I come to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. So I still have my first NA book. I still have it. Still, it's this old, ratted, beat up book. And step 2, I was sitting out on the steps where my mother lived. I was outside in the stairwell. And the stairwell looked exactly like this. And I read step 2, and I had a real burning bush experience where it was just like, oh, I know that you can't restore me to sanity. I know that I can't restore me to sanity. I know that no institution in this world can restore me to sanity. It just makes me insane.
Because the one that was supposed to told me they didn't want to take me anyway.
Exactly. There's nothing that could help me. I was done with anything of the world that could satisfy, help, love, support, trust, all of it. Crumbled, broken, in the garbage. There wasn't anything. And when I realized that there was a power greater than myself that could do it, it was as if I got to the land of Oz. Literally, everything became technicolor. I literally saw things differently. Literally, like physically, literally saw things clear. Literally, physically heard things. Literally, physically, my whole world changed. I can't describe it. It was as if the very fibers of my being, the atoms, everything that I was changed in that moment. It is, I cannot even describe what that was for me.
Well, they say that humility is pretty powerful. And the ultimate humility is admitting that you're not actually in control, right? Like there's something else I'm not the end all be all. And I remember thinking, studying yoga, and they always used to talk about surrender. I used to think, That's ridiculous. Listen, I grew up in punk rock scene. You don't surrender to anybody. I bow to no man. I trust no authority. I got to where I am. Isn't this great? I got to where I am by my own bootstraps. Nobody helped me. Meanwhile, like, look, I had loving parents. I had,
of course, you forget,
right? Yeah, and so when I used to read about you have to surrender, I used to think that I am not down for that. I'm not hardwired to surrender. That's not how this works.
This world teaches you that surrender means you're a weakling,
right? And then I remember researching some Sanskrit verses. And the word in Sanskrit for surrender also means to take shelter of. Mm-hmm. And when I read that, I thought, okay, that to me makes some sense. Because, and look, admittedly, I was at a different point in my life, right?
Sure.
A little older. But that makes sense to me. Like, oh, you mean I because I take shelter of people all the time. I mean, I've got friends and I talk to them about stuff when it's bothering me. And I am like, okay, so it's not so much that I gotta change. I have to actively change who I am. The very act of admitting that I'm not in control gives me some sort of shelter. The very act of doing that.
It's a relief.
Yeah.
It's a freaking relief.
It's a relief.
It's a damn relief. It's like, I thought I was running the show, and if I look at the wreckage that I left behind,
if I'm responsible,
I should be really freaking happy that I'm not in control anymore. It's like, you know what? You sucked at that job. Someone else is gonna have to be your boss, please.
And when I saw that, it made a lot of sense to me. And you're right, because the other thing it does is it gives you humility.
Yeah.
Which is also something that we're not supposed to have a lot of.
People don't even know what that word means.
Right.
They think it's like being humiliated.
Correct. And a good dear friend of mine often says it doesn't mean that you think less of yourself. It means you think of yourself less. Yeah. Right. We've got the same friend.
Yeah.
And it's very true.
Mm.
And it's counterintuitive because we're taught that we should be thinking of ourselves at all time. How is this moment to moment? How is this to my advantage? The minute you stop doing that, I found magical things happen. It doesn't mean you stop working hard. It doesn't mean you don't do your job. You don't do it well. You're not a good parent or a good father or a good brother or sister. It doesn't mean any of that. But the minute you understand that the outcomes to all that stuff actually isn't in your control, magical things can happen. And that's what at least I found that's what humility looks like. I work really hard, but I understand that there are external factors that influence all the outcomes to all of that.
Absolutely.
Thomas Jefferson once said something to the effect of, I believe in hard work and luck, and the more I do of the former, the more I get of the latter. And it's true. It's true. Like,
I don't know that one. I love that one.
Yeah. So
that's a good one.
I mean, humility is a super freeing, super powerful thing if you truly experience it. So you go through 12-step, you get clean. Mm-hmm. You're 28, right? You are older than 28 now. My mother raised me right.
27 years later.
27 years later.
So I am actually...
In 1 year, you will have been cleaner longer than you would not have been clean.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't count all the years before you did. But
yes.
Yeah. And I know what you do now is something really very special because you worked helping people through 12-step for quite a long time, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
of course,
as a leader and in the program and that, well, the program doesn't have leaders.
We have trusted servants, but yes. Sponsor.
Sponsor. Yeah. Thank you. And, through, I think, some of the same people we know, you got really into Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah. That was my second bottom in life. That's why I reached out.
That's why you came to bring this full circle. That's why you ended up in India at the same time I was.
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of why I ended up there because I wanted to do handstands, but the reality was like
you were looking for something else.
Well, I sort of hit this point in my life where I was not happy. I don't know that I realized it consciously, but subconsciously I realized I wasn't happy. And then I got to
put you where, Krishna put you where you belonged at that point.
Yeah.
No matter what reason was, whether you think it was a handstand or not,
Sure.
Krishna had other plans.
Sure. I mean, the divine, the divine always has other plans.
Totally.
And so I mean, that's, I guess I was searching for something to use the vernacular, so to speak.
I mean, when we're talking about the essence of bhakti and talking about the essence of the 12 steps, it's all semantics, all of it.
Well, it's all about service.
It's just however you want to package it up. It's like, I realized very quickly when I got into bhakti that the essence of what bhakti is what I'm doing in the 12-step program anyway.
And so now you combine them.
I combine them, yes, because there are people, and that's been a rocky road. I have to tell you, it hasn't been frickin' popsicles and frickin' cotton candy. I wish it was, but it just wasn't.
Well, anytime you trailblaze, it's never easy.
Yeah, especially also being a woman is another thing. It's like they don't respect the authority.
I'm just thinking of Cartman and
it's what I'm. That's the quote. That's the quote.
What you want to do is calm everybody down. Respect my authority. And so, I mean, and you're combining the two now, which you've been doing for what, 2 years?
No.
Well, no, longer than that.
5
years.
5 years. 4 online. 5 and I started the first meeting in Munich, small locally. Only like 2 people came.
And you call it Bhakti Recovery.
Then I called it Yoga Recovery.
Yoga Recovery.
And then I found out that there was like this other but we did no asanas. It was just like we did like
you didn't do the physical poses.
No,
You're doing the philosophy. I mean,
yes.
And it's important because most people in the West think of yoga as the physical practice.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's part of it. But it's, as a good teacher of ours says, it's like a condiment. And it's
totally.
It's like saying, come over to my house and eat ketchup. Like, no, ketchup and what?
That is so funny. It's true.
But I mean, but this is the example you use.
Philosophy is eating. Come over to my house and you serve ketchup in packages.
Right. I mean, this is what he often says. Like,
who said
ketchup.
This? Who said that?
It's Raghu.
Is that Raghu?
Yeah. Come over to my house and eat ketchup, and it's like, okay, and what else? No, that's it. We're just having ketchup. And there's a whole philosophical underpinning.
I freaking love that.
To the yoga practice.
Yes.
I mean, in effect, the physical yoga practice is meant to tire the body, so the mind, the breath can get calmer, so the mind can get calmer, so then
you can practice your philosophy.
Yeah, so you can really think deeply about these concepts. So you have a fusion of that with 12-step, although what it sounds like is they're so similar that
Yeah. So I mean, basically, what also got me into it is I was like getting a divorce. I was married for 17 years. Mm-hmm. Getting a divorce. Super I was like, so first of all, just for the 12-step people, anyone's listening, I didn't get to know anything about myself until I started working an ACA and CODA program. ACA is the Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. Mm-hmm. And Codependence Anonymous. So those 2 programs really, drugs were my solution. They weren't my problem. They were my freaking solution. Mm-hmm. Now, all these other programs address the problem. So basically, NA and AA, yes, they brush on that underlying problem or underlying, I like to call them samskara or whatever it is, mm-hmm. those underlying issues, anartas. Mm. And the ACA program gets underneath that. Yeah. So until I started doing that, I was not fully aware of all of the stuff underlying that. So I did a real yoga training mm-hmm. from the Shivananda disciplic succession. He has a yoga school, and it's a 2-year yoga school with asanas was the smallest part of it.
Right.
So you had to learn everything about bhakti yoga, dhyana yoga. You had to learn all of the 4 things in the Gita. You had to do all of that. Learn the philosophy. We had to study the Gita from Shivananda, not from Prabhupada, but from Shivananda. We had to learn Sanskrit. We had to learn everything in Sanskrit and in German. And so it was a very full yogic training. It wasn't some like 200-hour yoga handstand training thing. Like, I'm not saying that you did that. I'm just saying it was. So I got really what yoga was in the beginning.
Out there for.
Yeah, but that was what I got, you know. And in that, I had already reached out to Kastuba
from Wisdom of the Sages.
From Wisdom of the Sages, shout out Wisdom of the Sages, and started to get really into the bhakti part of it. Just like I knew that this was it. This was the section of the Gita, the bhakti section, where I just related to.
And you and Kastuba have history because Kastuba was down in the Lower East Side.
He was a Skoskin.
Yeah. He was Dave the Mod, I guess, was his name.
Yeah, he was a Skoskin.
So, what are you doing now?
So right now, I have 2 projects. The first project, well, not even a project, is my life. So it's, I saw that the similarities. I met Radhanath Swami, His Holiness Radhanath Swami, and through Kastuba. And I told him about this, and he just was very excited to hear it, and he just encouraged me to keep going. I quit my job. I got very sick because of the divorce, and I got a lot of chronic pain and stuff, which was a lot of trauma work, and I did a lot of that. I worked for the last 20, for all my recovery, I worked in visual merchandising. I walked into Ralph Lauren and talked my way in.
Knowing you, I can believe that very easily.
Talked my way right in there, lied through my teeth. They believed it, and then I worked my way up to manager, to visual merchandiser, to regional manager, like just did it. And I just was sick and tired of that life. If anyone knows what the fashion industry is like, it is, if you've ever seen The Devil Wears Prada, there you go.
It's one of my wife's more favorite movies.
Great. Yeah, me too, actually, because it is like that. It's freaking horrid. So, and I always knew it was, but I kind of always loved it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I love the game.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, but I loved being creative.
Yeah,
I loved designing things, getting things ready. It's like set design almost. Especially for Ralph Lauren. Actually, your office looks a bit like a shop at Ralph Lauren. This is like my besides from the table of assorted ties that when you walk in and the bouquet of flowers, that's
it.
Yeah. So anyway, where was I?
So you quit your job, and
right.
You've got 2 projects, and the first one's your life. You quit your job.
Right. So pandemic hits. Just did this thing in India with you and everyone else. Pandemic hits. Wisdom of Sages is on, and Raghu says something about 12-step program. This is exactly what the 12-step program says, and I haven't really. Raghu and I have talked, but weren't really friends at the time. We were friends, but not.
Yeah, you weren't close.
We weren't close. Yeah, exactly. And so, he said someone should do something like that. And then, I wrote in the chat board, I'm already doing it, so let me just open it up online. And thus it began.
Bhakti Recovery.
The Bhakti Recovery Group. Couldn't think of a name. I wanted to do all these names, and everyone was like, "That's politically incorrect. We can't use that." I wanted to use things like tribe or something like that. They're like, "No, you can't do that. And, no, you can't do that. You can't say that." And I was not aware because I live in Germany. We just don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, things got a little crazy over here.
Yeah,
time.
Exactly. So I was a bit like, okay, whatever. But then so Kastuba named it. He's like, why don't you just keep it simple? Call it Bhakti Recovery Group.
Gotta love Kastuba.
Yeah. And I was like, all right, cool. That's it. So, I was open to it. So it's called Bhakti Recovery Group. And it just grew and grew and grew. And
so you do it online.
I do it online. We're up to 21 meetings a week.
And is it And it's not just people recovering from, addiction.
No.
Addiction.
Actually, that's the minority of it at the moment. It's most people. Well, I have to say, so I think a lot of men have a lot of, sex problems or sex addictions or pornography addictions or whatever it is. Because if you're going to real full-on devotees, you have to be completely celibate.
Sure.
So even just one small stipulation in that is going to be a struggle. So it is addictions, anartas, and associated behaviors.
Got it.
Anarta is just generally something that gets in the way of Krishna consciousness, gets in the way of what your relationship with God.
Right.
Keep it very simple.
So then what's the second project?
The second project is it's with a nonprofit called The Journey Within. It's Radhanath Swami's project. And he does all kinds of nonprofit stuff. And we were doing, so it's really difficult to say because it's in the beginning stages. So I don't want to be.
Yeah, you don't have to.
We're in the beginning stages, but we had already have one retreat. We did it with Russell Brand.
Really?
Yeah, we had that 1 day retreat in London. So and we will be doing that annually. We'll be working sometimes with other Russell Brand, sometimes with other people. So basically, we're just inviting different communities over to see, and it's sort of. It's a sort of a universal thing, but it's with more spiritual yogic philosophies, and we're just building it now. It's like the Bhakti Recovery Group, basically, but just on a larger scale.
Gotcha.
So, and so I guess end game is really to have its own program, to have its own recovery center, to expand, to offer service, for people who can't afford it, and that's something that I believe in so much, especially in America. You either go to a 12-step program or you're rich. And if you're not, you die. It's, it's like rehabs here. I don't even, it's like you have to be incredibly rich to go to a rehab center. I mean, if you go to a nice place, what are you looking at? 70,000 to go to a therapy, something that's relatively comfortable and that's what I want. I want every addict, alcoholic, suffering person to have the same rights as anyone else with money, because that should not be a factor in recovery. I was lucky. I was very, very lucky. Although I can say almost every rehab and whatever didn't really help me, but it was part of my story.
Yeah.
But my dad had money. I was lucky. He was like, okay, you're going to rehab. Okay, you're going to do this. Paid for so much things that I just messed up, And I was lucky, but not everybody is as lucky.
And so Bhakti Recovery Group, this project you have that's sort of in its infancy stages, that's sort of a spiritual underpinning program that's very similar to that. And now
the Recovery Addicts.
Recovery Addicts. And now you're hanging out in the States for the next, week?
Yeah, I'll be here for a week and a half.
Yep.
And then I'm off to India.
Yep.
And then I'm off to London.
Sounds like there's at least a happy ending so far.
There is.
Yeah.
Got my daughter back. I'm a grandma.
Oh, that's awesome.
My daughter's in recovery. That's a whole nother thing. That's where I learned to do the CODA program.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah. She's followed exactly in my footsteps. But she was a crusty punk, which I could not get into.
That wasn't my bag. That wasn't my bag.
I was like, oh man, could you just been like a regular whatever? Why do you have to be a crusty?
Yeah.
Although she did shower. It wasn't like that, but.
That's important.
Yeah. But not crusty.
No, but.
But the punk with the dog.
Yep. Yeah,
European punks with the dog juggling. She used to juggle.
It's not
and
a skill
panhandle.
I possess.
Huh?
Also not a skill I possess.
No.
Well, I mean, look, Jiv, where can people find you if they want to, if they listen to this, if they want to get involved in Bhakti Recovery, if they just want to reach out to you, where can people hit you up?
So, First of all, I have a podcast as well.
That's right.
Second of all, or third of all, I have a podcast.
Sorry about that. So you have 3 projects. I just remember that. So yeah, you do have a podcast. Your podcast is pretty good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love it. So I love doing it because it's therapeutic. It's not for you guys, it's for me. I get to it's
like every talk I give at the beginning of a yoga class. It's really spoke to me. I'm really glad it did, because I was speaking right to me, because it's what I needed to hear this morning.
It's really true, though. Yeah. It's often I just have this stuff I got to get rid of. You know, it's there's the thoughts, there's the stuff I have, and when I share it, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah,
sharing, reciprocating, association.
What's the name of your podcast?
Bhakti Recovery Podcast. Go figure.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's it. Bhakti Recovery Podcast. You can get me anywhere where podcasts are being podcasted. The BhaktiRecoveryGroup.com is where you can go see our meeting list, and we have videos, and we have initiating gurus on there talking about it. We have
but it's not just for people who are into bhakti necessarily, right? If they're curious,
we have Krishna curious people. We have people who are just
because I know people who are in there who are not these big Hare Krishna people there.
No,
but for one reason or another, they vibe more with that than they do with a traditional maybe NA or AA
absolutely
or stuff like that.
Well, because we're very God centered,
right?
And that's the thing, and that's where you're not going to get at a regular 12-step meeting. You're not going to get that,
right?
And actually, it's becoming so much so that you don't even want to mention the word God at a recovery meeting, which doesn't make any sense to me. It's come to dinner, have some catch up. It makes no sense. If you look at the 12 steps, there's only one step that mentions addictions, associated behaviors, or anything else. All the other steps are God-oriented and cleaning house.
Gotcha.
That's it. So it is a God-oriented program. Call a spade a spade. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, you can.
Oh, okay. Is that politically not correct anymore?
I have no idea, but it's my podcast, and I said you could say it. So
well, I don't know. I'm just used to being you can't say that anymore. I haven't lived in the States.
Spade, as far as I know, spade is a garden tool, and you're calling a garden tool a garden
That's what I mean.
So that's the understanding I have it in.
Me too, but I was thinking oh God, maybe I can't say that anymore. Oh. My son corrects me a lot, though. He's you can't say that anymore. In public, I'm I tell him, that's gay. And he's shut up, Mom. I can't say that anymore. I'm come on, man.
Time, place, and circumstance,
totally.
I suppose. So you've got the podcast.
Got the podcast.
Where else can they find you?
Instagram.
Yep.
Although I have to tell you, the Instagram, you have to get me on JivaG Life. That's my Instagram handle, JivaG Life. Bhakti Recovery podcast or Bhakti Recovery group on Instagram is not very frequented.
Gotcha.
I can't do everything. It's really hard for me to keep up. If you go to BhaktiRecoveryGroup.com, there's a Zoom link on there.
Mm-hmm.
There's all you got to do is click. Doesn't cost. There's no dues or fees. We do accept donations, contributions, but there's no cost. You can come and go as you please. And we have about 12 meetings a week now. 12 or 14 meetings a week, I think. So
Great.
Some we have two times a day, and others. So and we're a really nice, warm Sangha community fellowship of people who just are super supportive of each other, and I love it.
Well, you gotta love what you do. That's important.
It's the only thing I want to do.
Well, gee, thanks for hanging out.
And thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah.
And now you got to buy me some shoes.
I can buy you some shoes. My dog literally ate those shoes, so we gotta get her some shoes.
You gotta buy my own shoes.
I'll get you some shoes. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, G.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
So nice to have been here. Thanks. Of course.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
That's all for today's journey down the Offbeat Path. Hope this episode's inspired you to forge your own unique trail. And if you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe, please share with a friend, and definitely leave us a review. Your support helps the community grow. Remember, the road less traveled is often the most rewarding. Until next time, this is Bob Healy, encouraging you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and above all, keep forging your own unique path. See you on the next episode.